Chapter 12:15. We look forward to your next visit. After sending off the last customer, Meg took off his apron and prepared to go out with Mia and the others to look for the missing delivery man. Ding! A bell rang, and a fully armed Connie walked in with an insulated box. She took off her helmet and excitedly said, "Boss, I've completed my mission. I've successfully delivered the food to the customer." The restaurant was silent. The people who were about to go out to look for her were all looking at her with complicated expressions. "Did you just deliver it?" Meg asked with a smile. "Yes, it's still warm." Connie nodded. She couldn't hide the joy on her face. This was the first time she had done something on her own. "That's really hard on the insulated box." Meg pursed his lips. The order was placed at 8 a.m., and the order was scheduled for delivery at 5 a.m. It was only delivered to the customer at 9 a.m. Dinner turned into supper. What a surprise. Most importantly, the delivery address wasn't far. It was just next door. "Big Sister Connie, did you break out of prison?" Amy asked curiously. Everyone was also looking at Connie curiously. What did Connie do in the 4 hours that she disappeared? Even if she had to crawl, she could have crawled back and forth a few times. Their house was too big, and I couldn't find the door, so I climbed in. Then I got lost again. Luckily, there were many kind people in there. They found me and even showed me the way and brought me out," Connie said innocently. You really broke out of the prison?" Meg couldn't stay calm after hearing Connie's description. She climbed over the high walls of the Batai prison and successfully got lost in the prison. What the fuck? Was that how a delivery man delivered food? Yabamiya and the others were also shocked. The Batai prison was very famous on the Northern continent. Connie actually climbed over the wall to get in? They didn't arrest you? Meg asked incredulously. Breaking into the Batai prison was no joke. Stupidity was not enough to make up for the crime. "No." Connie shook her head and excitedly said, "But I've acknowledged that uncle as my master. The hairless monk, the superhero in my heart since I was young." "That works too?" Meg raised his eyebrows. It was one thing to deliver food to the prison, but what was with this sudden apprenticeship? Although the lawless walker had now become the deputy warden of the Batai prison, he had still taken in an idiotic delivery man whom he had met for the first time as his disciple. Was his brain damaged? Furthermore, most importantly, there were actually people in this world who regarded the hairless monk as the superhero in their hearts. Why is your superhero the hairless monk? Shouldn't he be a handsome, brave, romantic, and powerful knight like Alex? Meg asked in confusion. "Although Alex is quite powerful, I prefer the hairless monk." Connie shook his head. "Big Sister Connie, aren't you afraid of becoming bald if you acknowledge him as your master?" Amy asked carefully. "If becoming bald can make me stronger, then I'm willing to exchange my hair for great power." Connie nodded resolutely. Meg took a few more glances at Connie in surprise. He didn't expect her to care so much about power. Although he couldn't understand why Rex would accept Connie as his disciple, this at least explained why she could come back unscathed after successfully breaking into the Batai prison. With the hairless monk's protection, Connie wouldn't have to worry about being captured in Chaos City anymore. "Ding! Congratulations, host. You have completed the first delivery mission. You have received a set of Mandarin duck hot pot recipe as a reward." Right at this moment, the system's voice appeared in Meg's mind. At the same time, a shiny brocade pouch appeared. The delivery mission was completed successfully. On the first day of going online, Meg was prepared to shut down this useless business. He looked at Connie and said, "Since you acknowledged him as your master, do you want to work in the prison?" Since Rex had accepted Connie as his disciple, it would naturally be more convenient for him to have her by his side to teach her. If Connie wanted to leave, he wouldn't keep her any longer. He could see the thirst for power in Connie's eyes. She didn't mention her background to him, so it must not be easy. "Boss, don't you want me anymore?" Connie looked at Meg nervously. She felt warmth and security at Amy's. Although the mission today was very difficult, she felt a great sense of accomplishment. She didn't want to lose this job. Meg looked at Connie's panicked gaze and thought of how she was like a frightened kitten when he first met her yesterday. His heart ached for her. He smiled and said, "If your master wants more time to teach you, I won't hold you back." But if you're willing to stay and continue working, I can let you complete the probation period first. I will then decide whether you stay or leave. He didn't say that I should quit my job. Connie shook her head. All right then, you can continue to work tomorrow. Meg nodded, then looked at everyone and said, Everyone has worked hard today. Pack up and go back early to rest. Elizabeth waved her hand. Ice crystals flowed to every corner of the restaurant like water, solidifying all the dust and oil. Then they shattered and floated out of the door, disappearing without a trace. You guys go back first. I still have to go to my master's place. I will be back later. After leaving the restaurant, Connie waved to everyone. She got on her delivery car and quickly disappeared into the streets. This was her personal car. After washing up, Amy put on her teddy bear pajamas and let Meg dry her hair as she said softly, Father, I think this bed is a little small. Can you give us a bigger bed? Amy, did I squeeze you? Anna, who was standing at the door, grabbed the hem of her dress uneasily. Then I will sleep on my side tonight. Amy shook her head and pointed at Ugly Duckling, who was squatting at the bathroom door, as she said, No, Ugly Duckling squeezed us. It is too fat. Meow. Ugly Duckling meowed aggrievedly. It lowered its head and licked its belly. Meg looked at Anna with a smile and said, Well, it is time to change the bed. Also, Amy and Anna have grown up. If you sleep together, then you can sleep in separate rooms. I have prepared a big bed for you in the room next door. From tonight onwards, you two can sleep in the room next door together, okay? Okay, I will sleep on the big bed with Anna. Amy nodded happily. Okay. Anna also nodded with a smile. She slowly let go of the hem of her dress. In a dark and long alley, Rex looked at Connie and said in a deep voice, Today, we will be learning about stealth. You were able to sneak into the Bot-Eye prison stealthily. This means that your stealth talent is extremely outstanding. You should have received the blessing of the hunting cat totem. As long as you can fully master this talent, you will quickly become an outstanding assassin. Stealth, I'm the best at it. At the same time, a bat that was hanging upside down on a tree outside the restaurant quietly flew into the small hole at the back of the restaurant. Chapter 12:16. Mag bought a 1.5-meter long children's bed from the system and set it up in the room next door. For the two little ones and the fat cat, it was already a big bed that was big enough for them to roll around freely. The purplish-blue decoration style was compatible with Amy and Anna's preferences. In the hands of the system, a design genius, it presented a very beautiful fairy tale style. When the children grew up, they still had to sleep in a room alone. Now that Anna was with her, Meg was not worried. Adults still had to have their own nightlife. Even if they did not have it now, Meg had to think about the future when he brought Irina back. When the two little ones who were jumping around on the bed were done with their excitement, Meg told them a short story, and the two little ones quickly fell asleep. Meg kissed Amy's forehead gently and scratched Anna's delicate nose. He turned off the bedside lamp and quietly left the room. Then he went upstairs to practice his swordsmanship. After breaking through to 8th tier, he had not fought yet. However, his swordsmanship had become more and more proficient under his daily practice. Basically, he could display his strongest strength in this realm. Alex, who was at the peak of 8th tier back then, was already able to kill the 9th tier or commander at the border. Now, he was confident that he could do the same. An hour later, Meg, who was soaked in sweat, went downstairs to take a shower. The hot water splashed on his body, and he looked at himself in the mirror. When he first came to this world, there was almost no extra flesh on his body. He was like a skeleton that could fall apart at any time. But now, his body had become well-proportioned and fit. His chest muscles were slightly bulging, and his six-pack abs were still well-defined even when relaxed. What was even more outrageous was his skin. It was delicate and white, completely different from the sallow and emaciated appearance he had in the past. Looks like I still have to get more sun. Otherwise, not many girls' skin can compare to mine. It covers up my masculinity. Meg sighed. It was not that he deliberately maintained his skin. Every time he was struck by the heavenly tribulation when he recovered his strength, it was like he had done a comprehensive detoxification. All the impurities in his body were cleaned out. In the future, if anyone asked him how to maintain his skin, he would definitely advise them to get struck by lightning. After taking a shower, Meg casually put on a bathrobe and went back to his room. The small bed in the room had already been recycled by the system. Because the recycling price was too low, Meg chose to keep it for the time being. Who knows, it might come in handy when they have a second child in the future. Now, Meg was the only one left in the spacious bedroom. Looking at the empty bedside table beside Yi Yan's bed, Meg was still not used to it. Lifting the blanket, Meg clicked on the glittering hot pot recipe in his mind. Thinking that the foodies in this world would also be dominated by hot pot, Meg couldn't help but smile. A huge amount of information quickly flowed into Meg's mind. After a brief moment of confusion, Meg began to seriously digest this large amount of information. The ingredients for hot pot were similar all over the country. The unique soup base was what really distinguished the hot pot. Speaking of spicy hot pot, the first one to bear the brunt was naturally Chongqing hot pot, a hot and fragrant pot of thick soup. Regardless of whether it was duck intestines or lotus roots and potatoes, was wrapped in a layer of shiny red oil and various seasonings when scooped up. With one bite, the heat and spiciness would erupt instantly, seeking that special pleasure between the numbness and spiciness. Meg had been to that special mountain city several times, but that level of spiciness was a little too strong for him. He had to wait for a few months after eating it once. He was more suited to the milder spiciness of Chengdu Plain. As for the clear soup hot pot, it seemed very simple, but if one wanted to make a name for himself in the clear soup hot pot world, that pot of clear soup still had to be filled with sincerity in order to jump out of the bland soup taste. Even if the guests didn't need dipping sauces, they could still taste the delicious taste. The recipe given by the system was very comprehensive. The red soup had 3 levels of insanely spicy, and medium spicy. It was similar to the spicy grilled fish and could satisfy the different choices of the guests. The level of mild spiciness didn't exist for the red soup hot pot at all. The clear soup hot pot could be ordered alone, or it could be paired with a Mandarin duck hot pot. Of course, for the people of Sichuan, the Mandarin duck hot pot was at the bottom of the chain of contempt. In addition to the soup hot pot, the cooking encyclopedia of common ingredients for hot pot was also included, such as how to cook the duck intestines and tripe, and the best time to eat the beef after putting it in the pot. These are all very precise. However, these were not things that Meg needed to learn tonight. One of the joys of eating hot pot was the process of personally putting down the ingredients and then scooping them up. The proficiency of the technique might determine the taste, but the joy of eating hot pot with friends was far more than that. It was just that hot pot was a completely new thing to the people of this world. When the time came, it was inevitable to make a hot pot eating guide for the guests. Meg digested the cooking methods of the 2 soup hot pots with full concentration for a while before he mastered them. He let out a light breath and prepared to enter the test field for the god of cookery. At this moment, the bedroom door opened silently. Meg opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the door. A black shadow flashed through the crack in the door, and the door quietly closed again. Camilla. Meg had already sensed her aura. This fellow really did not give up. He had just signed a contract this morning, and she came again at night. After thinking for a while, Meg closed his eyes again. With his current strength, he did not need to fear Camilla at all. Since she was not convinced, then he might as well see what she wanted to do today. Now that there was no one in the restaurant who could take over the work of the waitress, Meg still had to keep her here. This time I won't make the same mistake again. Camilla looked at the door with some pride. Last time, her reputation was ruined by that door. She did not even enter the door and was broken on the spot. It was really a disgrace to her reputation as the Countess. He's asleep. Camilla looked at the big bed. Her green eyes glowed red in the darkness, and she could clearly see everything in the room. Meg was lying on the bed. His breathing was steady, and it was obvious that he had fallen asleep. Where did Amy and Anna's small bed go? Camilla looked at the position where the small bed was placed with some confusion. The last time she came, Amy and Anna slept on that small bed. It's good that they slept in separate rooms. The next scene is indeed not suitable for children. In order to make this bad fellow completely submit to me, I have to teach him a lesson today." A smile appeared on Camilla's face. She raised her hand, and 3 photo stones flew out and landed in 3 different directions. Such a scene had to be recorded from all angles. After setting up the photo stones, Camilla took out the spirit binding rope and walked to the bed. Chapter 12:17. Last time, due to her lack of experience, Meg took advantage of the loophole and teased her instead. This time, she would not repeat the same mistake. She had practiced tying ropes to the point of perfection. How to tie a beautiful and embarrassing knot was indeed a skill, but for Countess Bartoli, it was not a difficult task. Camilla could already imagine Mag begging for mercy in her hands. Such a shameful and embarrassing scene should be able to make him hand over the photo stone obediently and then become a slave under her skirt. At that time, she would no longer have to worry about Miss Gloria having any thoughts about him. At that thought, Camilla couldn't help but smile. She wrapped the spirit-binding rope around Mag's hand that was lying on the bed. However, just as the rope went through Meg's hand suddenly clasped her wrist. Camilla was stunned for a moment. She looked at the hand that was holding her wrist. The fair and slender fingers were very strong. "Isn't he asleep?" Camilla panicked and looked at Meg's face. His eyes were still closed, and he didn't seem to have woken up. Could it be a dream? Camilla couldn't help but suspect. However, the hand that was holding her was so strong that she couldn't continue to thread the rope through Meg's hand. This gave her a headache. Meg was too cunning. If she could tie him up while he was sleeping, then she wouldn't have to worry about him playing any other tricks. This kind of opportunity didn't come by often. Camilla tried to turn her wrist, but Meg's hand was like an iron clamp that tightly clamped her wrist. She couldn't turn at all. Although she had the strength of a 9th-tier warrior, she wasn't very strong. She mostly used magic to control her enemies. Now that her arm was being held by Meg, it wouldn't be easy for her to break free. "Bastard, you're still so strong when you're asleep." Once the dim light condensed on Camilla's other hand, it seemed that she had to use magic to release this fellow's hand from her wrist. However, before she could cast her spell, Mag suddenly pulled her hand forcefully. She, who was standing at the side of the bed, lost her balance and fell onto the bed. She rolled over and lay next to Mag. Then, Meg naturally grabbed her other hand and easily held her in his arms. Camilla glared at him. If not for Meg's steady breathing, she would have thought that he was deliberately taking advantage of her. But now, her hands were under his control, and she was in his arms. Through the thin skirt, she could even feel the hot body behind her. His hard muscles were as clear as square blocks. Strange, this man who looked so thin and weak. How could his body be so hard? Her body immediately stiffened. She had lived for more than 300 years, experienced the last war between the races, drank the blood of her enemies, had a husband, owned a huge castle, and was the princess of the vampire clan. But she was still a virgin. In her eyes, men were dirty things. Even speaking a few words made her feel disgusted, not to mention having any physical contact with them. But now that Meg had grabbed her hands and held her in his arms, her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Her blood flowed quickly, making her feel breathless. Her pale face also flushed red. When she got married, some of the words her mother said to her surged into her mind, and her body started to heat up. She wanted to break free from Meg's arms immediately, but she was worried that she would wake him up. She was in a dilemma for a moment. Isn't she only interested in women? Mag was also slightly taken aback when he felt the petite body in his arms that was getting hotter and hotter. He wanted to tease Camilla a little, so he interrupted her spell casting. Furthermore, he only felt that there was no possibility of any romantic feelings between them, so he didn't care too much about his methods and actions. But now, even he could hear Camilla's heartbeat clearly. Vampires usually suffered from anemia for a long time, so he was a little worried that she would faint on the spot due to insufficient blood supply. Just as Camilla's face was getting hotter and hotter, and she was in a dilemma about what to do, she suddenly froze and softly muttered, "No, why would I be worried about an ordinary man waking up? I am Countess Bartoli, a powerful level 9 vampire." Yes, this is really strange. Meg nodded in response. You also think it's strange? Ah, Camilla screamed, and suddenly turned around, just in time to meet Meg's eyes. In the darkness, the two pairs of eyes were almost stuck together. You're not asleep at all, Camilla exclaimed, as if she had been greatly deceived. The one who should be screaming is me, right? Halfway through my sleep, there's another woman on the bed, and she's even lying in my arms. If this were to spread, my clean reputation would be ruined. Meg said with an innocent face. You should take responsibility. Camilla retorted. I'm a woman. Even if I'm at a disadvantage, it should be me who's at a disadvantage, right? I didn't ask you to take responsibility, and you actually shamelessly want me to take responsibility. You're a widow. Meg shrugged his shoulders. Then you're a widower, and you even have a child. Camilla was furious. Now that you mention it, we're quite compatible. Meg raised his eyebrows. That's true. Camilla stared blankly for a moment. After thinking carefully, it seemed to be true, and she subconsciously nodded her head. No, I definitely can't be together with this guy. Moreover, my purpose for coming here tonight is to get the images that can be used to retrieve the photostone. Camilla quickly came back to her senses and looked at Meg, who was still grabbing her wrist, and coldly snorted, Let go of me. That pervert who doesn't wear clothes when he sleeps. I'm clearly wearing a nightgown, all right? Moreover, coming to someone else's bed in the middle of the night, if we're talking about perverts, shouldn't it be you? Meg retorted. Although the nightgown was open, it was undeniable that he was still wearing it. Today I'll let you know what a real pervert is. Camilla sneered, and the surroundings around her instantly turned cold, and a dim light lit up on her fingertips again. Katja! At this moment, a crisp sound of metal being locked rang out, and Camilla's magic was interrupted again. Her hands were pulled together and handcuffed. You! Camilla opened her mouth in a slight panic. Smack! A round ball with a hole was stuffed into her mouth, and the rope was looped behind her to make a beautiful bow. Whoa! Camilla struggled to get up. Katja! Meg casually put a collar around her neck, and the magic was instantly blocked. Camilla stared blankly at Meg, and her gaze gradually became filled with fear. Chapter 12:18. Her hands were locked together, her mouth was stuffed full of balls, and there was a collar with a chain around her neck. Camilla was stunned and tried to struggle. This collar had the same effect as the spirit-binding rope. Once it was fastened, Camilla found that the magic in her body was confined, making her unable to move no matter how hard she tried. As for the metal shackles on her hands, although the edges were wrapped in soft fur, it was not something that she could break free from without magic. The hollow ball in her mouth made her cheeks puff up, almost filling her mouth. She could not speak and could only make whimpering sounds. As for the strange collar and the metal chain connected to it, the first thing she thought of was those dogs that were imprisoned by humans, or those pitiful women that were imprisoned by perverts and legends. In the blink of an eye, Camilla was shocked to find that she was captured by Meg again. Although there was no shameful rope, this set of equipment made her feel even more ashamed and panicked. This guy was indeed a pervert. If it was a normal man, how could there be such a perverted set of equipment on the bed all the time? And every movement was so skillful, as if he had done it countless times. Whoa! Camilla tried to make herself look calm, but she was panicking inside. This pervert, what does he want to do to me? Could it be that he wants to imprison me here and make me his sex slave, putting a collar and chain on me? Could it be that he wants to make me his dog? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. She never thought that she would fail twice in a row in the hands of Stinky Man. I'm not rusty at all. Meg was also surprised at his own skillfulness, but as a dog lover, he did often put a collar on his dog and took it out for a walk. This could explain why he was so skillful. Yes, that was it. Of course, as a gentle and polite gentleman, Meg's purpose of letting the system customize such a strange set of equipment was purely to guard against perverts. As expected, it came in handy tonight. He caught a female pervert, Bat, on the spot. As for stuffing a ball into her mouth, the purpose was to prevent her from making any strange noises during the interrogation, which would disturb the rest. However, With the system's custom-made soundproof standard, even if he didn't stuff the ball, he didn't have to worry about anyone hearing strange noises. The necklace was made from a small section of Camilla's spirit binding rope that Meg had taken from her last time. Using her rope to tie her neck, this was justice. I know you're panicking. It's okay. I won't do anything to you. Meg turned on the bedside lamp and looked at Camilla with a smile, just like a gentle and kind boss. Looking at Meg's smile, Camilla secretly heaved a sigh of relief. That's right, this guy is just a restaurant owner. He wouldn't dare to do anything to me. I'm Countess Bartoli, the princess of the vampires. However, you seem to have violated the contract between us. We agreed that you would work in the restaurant for a year, and I would hand over the photo stone to you. Then we would be even. Meg picked up a leather whip from the ground and twirled it in his hand. But it hasn't even been a day. What are you doing in my room? Camilla wanted to explain. You don't have to explain. These things have already made your intentions clear. Meg flicked the whip in his hand and made a crisp sound beside Camilla's ear. Camilla suddenly quieted down. She didn't dare to move or make a sound. She looked at Meg. This guy almost whipped her delicate face. Don't be afraid. I'm a good person. Meg threw the whip in his hand behind him and smiled again. Seeing Meg throw away the whip, Camilla heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this guy really didn't have the guts to do anything to her. Meg flipped his wrist, and a white goose feather appeared in his hand. He slowly approached Camilla, and his smile gradually became perverted. Camilla stared blankly at the feather in Meg's hand. Why did this guy take out a feather? Could it be that he wanted to use this feather to make her submit? What a joke. How could the dignified Countess Bartoli submit to him because of a feather? Now you have two choices. 1. Nod your head and swear in the name of your ancestors that from today onwards, you will submit to me for a year. You will not disobey or attempt to resist. 2. Shake your head and accept my punishment until you nod your head. Meg looked at Camilla and asked seriously, You want me to submit to you? Dream on. Camilla stared at Meg and shook her head firmly. No matter what methods this guy used to torture her, she would never submit to him. Since you don't have the spirit of the contract, I have no choice but to use some special methods. Meg sighed and bent down to pinch Camilla's ankle. Camilla was shocked and wanted to retract her leg. Could it be that this pervert wanted to do that kind of thing to her? However, Meg's hand was so strong that no matter how she struggled, she could not retract her leg. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her leg. The high heels she was wearing had been taken off. Meg casually threw the high heels to the side and glanced at the fair and tender foot and the round and cute thumb that was like a pearl. Because of her nervousness, she arched a beautiful arc. He calmly looked at Camilla and said, Nod or shake your head? Camilla shook her head firmly, but her eyes were full of panic as she looked at Meg. She had heard of a pervert called foot fetishism. Could this guy be that kind of pervert? What kind of disgusting thing was he going to do to her cute little feet? Why bother? Mag sighed. He used the white feather in his hand as if it was a paintbrush and gently drew on the bottom of her jade-white feet. Ugh! Camilla's body trembled as if she had been electrocuted. Her mind instantly went blank. Immediately after, it was as if countless ants had crawled on the spot where the feather had just swept. That kind of numbing feeling made her body tense up. Her mouth that was blocked could only let out a meaningless moan. The decision is yours. Whenever you have thought it through, you just have to nod your head. Meg said calmly. The feather drew circles on the bottom of her foot and occasionally brushed through the gaps between her fingers, as if he was using a brush to draw a painting. Sob, sob, sob. Camilla felt her mind go blank. She thought about how her feet were being played with by a man, and the ticklish feeling seemed to be magnified infinitely. However, her mouth was gagged, and her hands were tied behind her back. Under the ambiguous warm light, there was nothing she could do to help her. Although her rationality told her that she definitely could not give in to this guy, after experiencing the attack of the feather for more than 10 minutes, Camilla, who was soaked in sweat, finally could not bear it and nodded her head. Chapter 12:19. Camilla, who was drenched in sweat, lay limp on the bed. Her eyes were still glistening with tears, and her face was red. She looked at Meg with resentment, feeling as if all the energy in her body had been squeezed out. She did not expect this guy to use such a perverted and despicable method. Tickling. Very good. Meg reached out to untie the rope behind Camilla's head and pulled the ball out of her mouth with his pinky finger. You can swear now. I, Camilla Bathory, swear in the name of the ancestors of the vampires that from today onwards, I will submit to Meg for a year. I will not disobey or resist. Camilla gritted her teeth and said. Her mouth moved, and she felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. Remember your oath. From today onwards, work hard and don't harass me anymore. I already have a daughter. Meg nodded in satisfaction. He helped Camilla turn over, unlocked the handcuffs that bound her hands, and took off the collar on her neck. You can leave now. Meg took 2 steps back and said to Camilla, who was lying on the bed. As a normal man, he should do something in the face of such a mature lady who could not move or resist. But he was such an unusually handsome man. Taking advantage of someone's precarious situation was not what a gentleman would do, although he was the one who caused this danger. In the distant border of the wind forest, there was a woman who was risking her life for the future and freedom of the elves. How could he plant weeds on her head? That was a valiant existence that could send a 10th-tier powerhouse flying with a stool. Putting all these aside, Meg had already passed the stage of being controlled by his lower body. So, he looked at Camilla, who was still lying motionless on the bed, and could not help but urge, Why are you still here? I can't move. Camilla's resentful voice sounded. Although her magic had recovered after the collar was removed, she did not have any strength in her body. Even if she wanted to immediately leave this place that had humiliated her, her body would not allow her to do so. Where is your home? Meg frowned. The boundless sea realm. Meg thought about it, and felt that there was nothing wrong with what he said. Then I can't send you home. You can sleep here tonight and go to work tomorrow, Meg said casually. I will definitely not sleep in the same bed as you. Camilla's eyes widened. Could it be that this fellow is going back on his words? I don't want to sleep with a sweaty person. Meg rolled his eyes. Camilla heaved a sigh of relief. Although the sweat on her body made her a little uncomfortable, the bed she was lying on was very comfortable. She felt as if her whole body was going to sink into it. It was soft and super warm. If she could sleep here for the night, it would be, you sleep on the floor. Meg spread the quilt on the ground and made a mattress beside the bed. Then, he carried the startled Camilla and put her on the ground. He pulled the quilt over her and nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. You won't be able to find a girlfriend like this. Camilla grumbled. This fellow actually made her sleep on the floor while he slept on the bed. Hee, I have a daughter. Meg scoffed. Furthermore, the number of ladies who want to be my girlfriend every day is enough to circle Chaos City. Camilla choked. Meg was really not bragging. What a troublesome night attack. Meg looked at the wet bedsheets and sighed. He could only change the bedsheets and blankets and keep the 3 photo stones at the same time. He looked at Camilla, who was wrapped up like a dumpling, and smiled. Good night. Then he switched off the lights. Very soon, Meg's steady breathing could be heard. Camilla, who was originally nervous, heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Meg's steady breathing. It seemed like Meg really did not have any other intentions towards her. However, she soon thought angrily, why? This fellow actually has no feelings for me at all? Am I really not a charming woman? Although her mind was filled with messy thoughts, and she was sleeping in a man's room with his blanket over her, Camilla fell asleep very quickly as fatigue flooded her. Meg closed his eyes and pushed open the test field for the god of cookery. If Camilla did not want her ancestor's coffin to be unstable, she should not try to hurt him. Because of Camilla's sudden night attack, Meg had already wasted a lot of time. In order to prevent himself from not being able to leave the test field for the god of cookery when he woke up the next day, he had to enter as soon as possible. Once he entered the kitchen, a strong, spicy smell greeted him. On the seasoning rack, there were already a few open seasonings. They had already started to make their presence known even before they were cooked. Simmering hot pot base ingredients was not an easy task, especially for a pot of spicy and mellow soup. There were more than 10 kinds of spices and seasonings, and it also required precise ingredients and skillful simmering skills to make a pot of red soup that people could not stop eating after eating it. In the soup pot, the most important thing was that pot of soup. This soup was not clear water. It had to be beef soup that had been boiled for more than 10 hours. The soup was fragrant and mellow. Large pieces of butter slowly melted in the pot, and chopped bean paste was poured into the pot to make a pot of red chili oil. Sprinkling in a handful of pepper, the spicy smell naturally bloomed. Pouring in the cooked beef soup and adding in red chili, old ginger, and other spices and seasonings, it slowly made a pot of fragrant red soup. As for the clear soup pot, it was much simpler. Clear soup was nourishing, but it was not as bland as water. It also required a pot of bone broth to release the taste of the ingredients. After replaying the steps in his mind several times, Meg began to boil the soup pot. The soup is too bland. Failure. Stir-frying pepper for 2 seconds. Failure. The spiciness is too low. Failure. Failure. Meg was like a cold killer, calmly accepting the system's judgment of failure, and then pouring the failed red soup pot after pot into the wastewater pool. As expected, he did not feel any heartache when he did not spend money. Early the next morning, when the alarm clock rang, Meg opened his eyes almost at the same time. Camilla also opened her eyes at the same time. She had a very strange dream. She dreamed that she was caught by Meg, imprisoned with a strange instrument, and then tickled with a feather. Then she saw a hand reach over her head, grab a strange-looking thing that was making a lot of noise, and press it hard. The ringing stopped instantly, and then her eyes met with Meg's face that was poking out of the bed. "Ah!" Camilla let out a cry of surprise. "That was not a dream. Good morning, Father." At this moment, the door was pushed open, and Amy jumped in happily. Chapter 12:20. Sorry for disturbing you. Amy looked at Meg and Camilla, who were lying on the bed and on the floor. She looked at Meg with a complicated expression and slowly retracted her foot that had just stepped into the room. She even carefully closed the door. "Amy?" Outside the door, Anna looked at Amy, who had closed the door, perplexed. She wanted to say hello to Uncle Mag. "Anna, if a man and a woman sleep in the same room, will something bad happen between them?" Amy looked at Anna with some distress and asked. "I don't know." Anna shook her head. After thinking seriously, she said, "But I heard from an auntie before that if a man and a woman sleep together, they will have a baby. That's how we were born." "Have a baby?" Me's eyes lit up, but a troubled expression soon appeared on her face as she asked, "Should I tell big sister Irina about this? If I have a cute little sister, it will be fun, right?" Anna looked at Amy with some confusion, but she did not ask any more questions. In the room, Meg, who was still holding the alarm clock, and Camilla, who had sat up, were also petrified. They looked at each other with a complicated expression. "Remember the vow you made last night. Now, you can go to the bathroom to take a shower, then change into clean work clothes and start today's work," Meg said to Camilla, who was gathering magic on her fingertips. Camilla choked. Her body was still a little sore when she thought of what happened last night. However, she had already made the vow, so she could only withdraw her hand resentfully. She pulled the blanket over her head and screamed loudly. She threw the blanket away, jumped up, and walked out the door. Meg sat on the bed for a while to regain his composure. After cooking the hot pot soup continuously for dozens of days, his mind was still filled with the bright red soup. He felt a little like he was possessed. And the problem now was, what would Amy write in her little notebook after seeing the scene just now? If Irina saw it, would he still be able to keep his legs? Early in the morning, Meg was faced with a very severe test. The little fellow doesn't know anything. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Meg tried to convince himself that nothing had happened last night. He had let Camilla sleep on the floor for the entire night, and he had really kept his virginity. He got out of bed and changed into his chef's uniform. Then he tidied up the strange things he left behind last night and threw the bedsheets into the washing machine. Just as Meg stepped out of the door, Camilla, who had changed into her chef's uniform, came out of the bathroom. Her hair was still wet and messy. She glared at Meg resentfully and went downstairs. Meg raised his eyebrows, but did not take it to heart. After all, Camilla had already sworn an oath. After a simple wash, he went downstairs to prepare breakfast for the cleaners. In the kitchen, Camilla had already started cutting vegetables. Meg came downstairs and saw Amy and Anna playing with Ugly Duckling. He smiled and asked, "Amy, Anna, good morning. Why are you up so early today?" "Good morning, Uncle Meg." Anna greeted him politely. "Good morning, Father." Amy also raised her head in response. She looked in the direction of the kitchen and whispered, "Is big sister Camilla going to stay in your room from now on?" Meg pondered, thinking about how he should explain it to Amy. "Then will she give birth to a baby?" Amy asked softly. Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Amy in disbelief. Who taught her that? The sound of chopping suddenly stopped in the kitchen, and the dining room also fell silent. Anna looked at Meg, and then looked in the direction of the kitchen. She seemed to know something. "Amy, actually last night, big sister Camilla fell sick and came to the dining room to ask me for help. Because it was really late, I let her sleep on the floor, and I slept on the bed. In this way, she won't have a baby." Meg tried to explain. "She won't have a baby?" Amy was a little disappointed when she heard that. She still wanted to have a little sister to play with. "Yes, she won't have a baby." Meg heaved a sigh of relief. "Then you two can have one." "That won't do." Meg hurriedly shook his head. When he saw Amy's puzzled look, he explained, "I can only have a baby with my spouse, not with other women. Camilla is not Father's spouse, so she can't have a baby with me." Amy thought for a moment and said, "Then what about Mother? When are you going to bring her back and give me a baby?" Camilla, who was holding a knife in the kitchen and about to kill someone, suddenly stopped and listened carefully. Speaking of which, Meg had never mentioned anything about Amy's mother, so she did not know who she was or where she was. For some reason, she felt a little nervous. "Soon. Father will bring her back soon," Meg said with a smile. "That's great." Amy smiled. "Then you two must give birth to a baby for me to play with." Okay. Meg nodded with a smile. However, he could not make the decision. He can actually bring her back? Looks like it's impossible between him and Miss Gloria. Camilla's face lit up, but she felt a little empty in her heart. She thought angrily, "Scumbag, he already has a wife and a child, but he still keeps so many young and beautiful girls by his side, using food and work to deceive their feelings." Anna hugged Ugly Duckling with envy in her eyes. She already did not have the chance to see her mother again. After comforting Amy, Meg went into the kitchen. However, he did not find the ingredients used for hot pot in the kitchen stove and fridge. "System, where are my ingredients?" Meg asked in his heart after he walked around the kitchen to make sure he did not miss anything. Ding! The current restaurant is not suitable to launch hot pot. Host, please set up a designated hot pot area. After the mission is completed, all hot pot ingredients will be unlocked. If the mission fails, the right to operate the hot pot business will be revoked. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. Why didn't Madam come out for the whole night? Could it be that she fell into the trap again during this night attack? On the treetop outside the restaurant, Caesar yawned and shook off the snow that had fallen from the tree. He was a little worried. He had been waiting outside the restaurant for the whole night to make sure that no one entered or left the restaurant. Without any disturbance, it should be easy for Madam to deal with Meg with her strength. However, he did not expect to see Madam come out of the restaurant after waiting for the whole night. What should he do? Chapter 1221. Designated Hot Pot Area. Meg muttered. The system's request was not without reason. Eating hot pot had always been a leisurely thing. Sitting there, ordering a table full of dishes, eating and chatting with the steaming hot soup pot, it was not unusual for them to eat for the whole night. That was not a friendly thing for other customers. Moreover, the existing wooden tables were not suitable for eating hot pot. He had to buy a batch of special hot pot tables. System, the 4 shops next door mine. Design and renovate 2 of them into designated hot pot areas. Meg said in his heart. Fortunately, Mabai had left the shops open for him. Otherwise, he would have to set his sights on the Batai prison. You have obtained 200 square meters of shop space. At the same time, you can expand the business area outside by 100 square meters. After calculation, the cost of the designated hot pot area is as follows. Interior renovation costs 300,000 copper coins, 33 sets of self-heating hot pot tables and chairs, 330,000 copper coins. Total, 830,000 copper coins. The system's voice sounded. Fixed price, 400,000 copper coins, Meg said calmly. Host, is there anyone who haggles like you? The system was a little uneasy. Meg curled his lips and said, for 200 square meters of shop space, 400,000 is more than enough according to the standard of renovation. Moreover, you're using first-hand materials. There are no middlemen to profit from the price difference. This price is about right. Host, you can't compare it according to Earth standards. In order to adapt to the various strange races in this world and avoid problems due to the materials not being able to bear the weight, the materials used by the system are all top-grade materials shipped directly from all over the continent. For example, the deep cold granite collected from the deep sea can withstand the pressure of 100,000 pounds without cracking. Even if a giant dragon shows its original form, it can still withstand it. The hot pot made of super alloy can ensure that the hot pot is evenly heated and will never stick to the pot. It can withstand the temperature difference of 1,000 degrees in an instant. Also, Meg was speechless as he listened to the system talk about the sources of various renovation materials. This was no longer a simple luxury. It was not even that difficult to embed diamonds. All right, seeing that you are so sincere, I will add another 99 copper coins. I believe you will definitely become the greatest designer in history, Meg encouraged. Do you really think so? The system sounded touched. Yes. Meg rolled his eyes, but his voice was very firm. Nobody knows a son better than his father. This system is too touched. Since that's the case, this system agrees to your offer and accepts this renovation mission at the price of 400,999 copper coins. May I ask, do you want to start the renovation now? No, let's wait until tonight. It's easy to arouse suspicion if we make such a big deal all of a sudden. Meg's mouth curved into a smile. They had just launched the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. There was no need to rush the hot pot. After confirming the matter of the hot pot, Meg began to cook congee with pork and century egg for the cleaners. He presented the congee to them at 6:30 sharp. Although their breakfast every day was monotonous congee with pork and century egg, the cleaners still ate it with relish. To them, such a delicious breakfast with meat was unimaginable in the past. While the cleaners were eating porridge, Meg wrote a notice and pasted it on the shop next door. The designated hot pot area is being renovated. Please look forward to it. Yabamiya read aloud. She looked at Meg in confusion and asked, Boss, what's hot pot? Is it a pot that can catch fire? Amy asked curiously. The girls also looked at Meg curiously. It seemed that Meg was preparing to expand the shop again. We'll eat hot pot tonight. You'll know tonight, Meg said mysteriously. He didn't reveal too much. His words aroused everyone's curiosity and anticipation. The customers who came to line up outside the restaurant also saw the notice pasted on the shop next door. They had a lot of guesses about the designated hot pot area. However, Meg was tight-lipped and didn't reveal anything. He only said that he would reveal the secret tonight. It could be said that he had whetted everyone's appetite. Madam, you're finally out. Caesar saw Camilla coming out from the side of the restaurant and rushed forward excitedly. He looked at Camilla, who was still wearing her chef's uniform, and asked with a strange expression, Madam, are you all right? Where did you go last night? Didn't you know to look for me when you didn't hear any news about me? Camilla snorted coldly. Didn't you ask me to stay outside? Caesar said weakly. Scram! A ball of black light rose from Camilla's feet, and she disappeared on the spot. Boss, what should we do now? It's so embarrassing to go to class like this. A group of pink pig heads gathered in the alley outside the school gate. They were the members of the Little Tyrant gang who had their magic reflected by Amy yesterday. At this moment, everyone was looking at Bolton with worried expressions. Although they had all turned into pig heads, their figures didn't change, and their facial features could still be seen. Sigh. At the end of the day, we're still inferior. In front of big sister Amy, we're all little brothers. Bolton sighed. He was also a little distressed. He thought about how he had painstakingly planned for 3 years and went through hundreds of battles to establish such a huge foundation. However, if the little tyrant gang were to enter the school with pig heads today, their dignity would be destroyed and all their previous efforts would be in vain. They had to go to class. The school could tolerate their fooling around to a certain extent, but they were very strict about attendance. If they missed class without a reason, they would most likely be expelled. However, if they went to class like this, they would definitely be treated as a joke by their classmates. Wow, so many pig heads. At this moment, a familiar voice came from the alley entrance. At the same time, a bicycle stopped. Paige. Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at the group of primary school students who were staring at the pink pig heads in the alley. It seemed like they were the ones who had fought with Amy and the others yesterday. Amy's shout successfully attracted the attention of many students who were in school. Many of them came forward to watch. Isn't this the little tyrant gang? Yeah. Why do they all turn into pig heads? Aren't they usually the ones who turn others into pig heads? Why did they all turn to pig heads this time? The students muttered curiously. Many of the students who had been bullied by the little tyrant gang couldn't help but laugh. Calm down. Bring out your aura. Bolton shouted at the gang members who wanted to cover their faces with their school bags. He walked toward the alley entrance with his head held high and his chest puffed out. He knelt on one knee and said solemnly, "Greetings, big sister Amy." The other gang members were stunned when they saw this. They immediately went forward and knelt on one knee as well. They said in unison, "Greetings, big sister Amy." Has the gang been successfully recruited? The orderly's slogans stunned Meg, who was about to leave. He looked at the primary school students with pig heads and tried his best not to laugh. Chapter 12:22. After the morning service ended, Meg went to the study to read the information. He had to finish reading this box of information in 7 days. After that, the Grey Temple would collect all the information. This box contained the secret history and the latest news of the various races on the Norland continent. The intelligence personnel of Chaos City had spent a lot of effort and cost to obtain it. It would be a huge fortune no matter who got it, and it could cause a lot of trouble for Chaos City. Meg naturally had no objection to that. Michael and Roland had already shown enough sincerity by handing over such core information to him. Besides, it was not difficult for him to finish reading and memorizing all the information in 7 days. The goblins' territory was located in the east of the Norland continent. With Vic Mountain as the center, they had built an underground cavern empire. The goblins' power was ranked last on the Norland continent. They only had 7 to 8 10th tier powerhouses. However, the goblins who were good at business and mining had accumulated a huge amount of wealth. The countless underground caverns in Vic Mountain had also become the goblins' indestructible fortress. No one could defeat the goblins in the underground caverns. This saying had been circulating on the continent for thousands of years. Hence, even though the goblins looked weak, they had the ability to protect themselves on the Norland continent. The goblins, who were known for their cunning, had a unity that put other races to shame when it came to internal governance. In history, the goblins had never had any internal strife. In this set of information, there was almost no flaw in the internal structure of the goblins. The only problem was that they were indeed very weak. It was not easy for them to defend their current territory, let alone expand outwards. It was precisely because of this that the goblins chose to form an alliance with Chaos City. The forest trolls' territory was adjacent to the goblins. The tall trolls lived in the vast Demon Tower forest. Their huge bodies also gave them great power and unique talent. In terms of individual talent and power, they were second only to the giant dragons. Almost all the trolls could break through to the 5th tier, and they also had plenty of mid-tier and high-tier combat power. However, the forest trolls' population was not huge. Their unique reproduction method was destined to limit the growth of their population. However, the Trolls King was very interested in expanding his territory. He was even more ambitious in forming an alliance with the orcs. They had their eyes on the vast wind forest. Perhaps it could help them break through the shackles of the slow growth of their population. The territory of the evil demon clan was located in the endless sea. The numerous evil demon clans occupied the islands in the sea and thrived there. Their numbers have been increasing for nearly 100 years. Furthermore, over the past 100 years, they have been fighting against each other, so their combat abilities were extremely strong. The islands in the Boundless Sea realm were no longer enough to satisfy the ambitions of all the races. Hence, they started to search for more land on the Norland continent. The alliance between the demons and the Roth Empire was the most powerful alliance at the moment. It could even rival the giant dragons. In the past 100 years, the Roth Empire's power had grown the fastest. The humans, who had been recuperating, had multiplied at a terrifying speed. They had also organized and developed 2 stable leveling systems for knights and magic casters. With the support of a huge population, the number of top-notch powerhouses had reached the top in the past 100 years, and the number of mid-level magic casters and knights had crushed any other race. It was very hard to imagine that the humans, who were seen as 2-legged sheep by the demons and orcs back then, could establish a powerful force that was only second to the giant dragons in just a short 100 years. Meg was attracted by a piece of news when he browsed through the information about the orcs. There was a rebellion in the Falk tribe. The chief was killed by his cousin, Gary, who colluded with the August tribe and imprisoned the chief's son. He became the new chief of the Falk tribe. In this rebellion, apart from the chief's son who was imprisoned, all of the chief's relatives were executed. Only the chief's daughter was missing. She might have escaped. The Falk tribe was the second largest orc tribe. They believed in cheetahs were very powerful and had many powerhouses in their tribe. Meanwhile, the August tribe was the largest orc tribe. They believed in giant bears. Who would have thought that they would participate in the Falk tribe's rebellion? Of course, all these were not important. What was important was that Meg saw the description of the Falk tribe's chief's daughter at the bottom. 14 years old, cat ears, brown curly hair, freckles on her nose. Hee. Isn't this Connie freaking? Meg had a complicated expression. Connie had mentioned her brother before, but he didn't expect that he was her only family member left. A rebellion had turned her from a little princess of a tribe into a stray cat. She had stumbled all the way from the Twilight Forest to Chaos City. In order to avoid being hunted down, she must have suffered a lot along the way. A morning passed in the blink of an eye. Meg put down the information about the orcs in his hands and kept the box in the secret compartment. The relationships between the various orc tribes were very complicated. Just the Falk tribe and the August tribe alone had many disputes. The August tribe, which was in favor of war, managed to control the Falk tribe, which was in favor of peace, through a rebellion. This was obviously to achieve internal unity before the peace talks. Meg went downstairs. Connie was lying on the counter, staring at Ugly Duckling in a daze. The 2 cats were twitching their ears as if they were having some kind of strange communication. Connie turned to look at Meg when she heard the footsteps. She smiled and asked, "Boss, when do I start work?" She couldn't wander around the streets and couldn't show her face in the ice cream shop. Hence, she could only daydream in the restaurant even when she didn't need to work. "I haven't received any new orders today. You'll have to start work when you have new orders for. Are you full?" Meg shook his head. Then he curiously asked, "Don't you need to learn from your master during the day?" "No. My master said that I only need to learn from him every night. I don't need to learn during the day." Connie shook her head and yawned. Meg was a little surprised. However, he understood after thinking about it. Cats were nocturnal animals, and Rex was teaching according to their aptitude. Hence, he nodded with a smile and said, "Then you should sleep more during the day. You want to duck my salary, right?" Connie asked nervously. "Do I look like that kind of person?" Meg pursed his lips. He wasn't an evil capitalist. "Then, I'm going to sleep." Connie lay on the counter and started to sleep immediately. Ugly Duckling walked over slowly and reached out its chubby paw towards Connie's head. It retracted its paw just as it was about to touch her. After thinking for a while, it lay down too. It rested its head on her arm and closed its eyes comfortably. Meg looked at the two sleeping cats and smiled helplessly. He turned and went into the kitchen to prepare the ingredients for lunch. After a while, Camilla came too. Chapter 1223. In the afternoon, Meg began to prepare for the hot pot. Considering that this world knew nothing about the great invention of the hot pot, he decided to have a live stream of the hot pot before it was officially launched. Yes, he would personally eat it for them to see. As the venue was already in place, Meg easily obtained a hot pot table, ingredients, and the right to use the pots and pans from the system. There was a hole in the middle of the round black granite table, and it was just big enough to fit a big pot. There were 4 types of pots to choose from: a 9-square grid, a double pot, a pot within a pot, and a single pot. The table was very big and could accommodate 9 people at the same time. There was a reason for this. There were 9 squares, 9 seats, and each person could claim 1 square. Everyone would do their own thing and not disturb each other. Even if one person came alone, they could still have a meal with 9 people. Of course, Meg also prepared some tables for 4 or 6 people, which were suitable for different numbers of people. It was hot pot, after all. It was better to eat it with familiar people. As Camilla and Connie couldn't show up, he prepared a small pot for 2 people for them, so they could only eat the hot pot in the restaurant. There were many passengers sitting on the back of a huge white bird. Moss, young mistress, they said Chaos City is just ahead. Laura whispered to Vanessa, who was wearing a veil. Really? Seems like we can still make it for dinner. Vanessa's eyes lit up with excitement. Young mistress, why don't we go back? His master and madam must be very worried about you now. It's not good. It's all right. We'll go back after a few days. Laura shook her head. She looked at Laura, who was in a dilemma, and held her hand with a smile. Don't worry. I won't let them punish you when we go back. I forced you to do all this. They know my character very well. But Vanessa pressed her finger gently on Laura's lips with a smile and said, Sure, we're going to reach Chaos City soon. Let's put aside all the unhappy things. The most important thing now is to prepare for the delicious food. Laura's mouth moved, but she didn't say anything in the end. She just sighed in her heart. She naturally knew the princess's character the best. Although she was usually very obedient, as long as she set her mind on something, she would definitely do it. The flying steeds stopped outside Chaos City. Everyone dismounted and walked towards the city gate. So Chaos City is so majestic. It's not inferior to Rodu in any way. Vanessa looked up at the towering city walls and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Then she said happily, As expected, I should come out more often. The outside world is much bigger than I thought. Laura looked around cautiously. Although she was just a maid who didn't know any magic or martial arts, there were no guard around the princess, so she became the princess' only guard. She had to be on her guard. When they entered the city, Vanessa asked the guard standing at the city gate, How do I get to Mamie's? The guard took a glance at Vanessa and Laura. The 2 little girls didn't have steeds, and it seemed that they were attracted by Mamie's fame. During this period of time, he had already met a few people who asked for directions. He smiled and said, After you enter the city, just hail a horse-drawn carriage with the words operation on it. They will take you there. It's a little far to walk from the north to the south of the city. Thank you. Vanessa thanked him politely before entering the city with Laura. After entering the city, there was no one around. Laura whispered, Princess, we shouldn't take a stranger's horse-drawn carriage. If the coachman has ill intentions, Laura, this is Chaos City, the city of peace. It's the safest city on the Norland continent. Vanessa smiled as she flagged down a horse-drawn carriage with the words operation on it. But isn't Chaos City famous for its chaos? Laura was a little perplexed. Go back and read more books. Vanessa patted Laura's head with a smile. Then she looked at the coachman and asked, Sir, can you send us to Mamie's? Of course. I go there a few times every day. The coachman smiled honestly. Let's go, Vanessa said to Laura before climbing into the horse-drawn carriage. Oh, Laura rubbed her head before climbing into the horse-drawn carriage as well. The princess had read a lot of books, so she knew much more than she did. Sir, Is Mamie's very famous in Chaos City? Vanessa asked the coachman as the horse-drawn carriage set off. Yes, Mamie's is the most famous restaurant in Chaos City now. It has only been open for half a year, but the entrance is already filled with people when it's mealtime. If we get there late, we won't even get to eat. Then will we be able to eat if we go now? Vanessa was a little nervous. If we go now, we'll be able to get to the front of the line. However, Mamie's only opens at 5 p.m., so we'll have to wait for an hour to get there. What kind of restaurant is this? Customers have to wait in line. Laura murmured. Did the princess have to wait in line for a meal with a bunch of people? The coachman chuckled and said, Young lady, you have no idea how many people love to eat Mamie's food. However, that restaurant has many strange rules, so you have to follow them. Otherwise, you'll be blacklisted by Mr. Mac, and you won't be allowed to enter the restaurant in the future. Waiting in line is just one of the rules. As long as I can eat good food, it's only right to wait in line for a while. Talented people have some personality. Vanessa smiled and looked forward to it even more. The horse-drawn carriage traveled along the wide streets of Chaos City. Vanessa lifted the curtains and looked out. There were neat rows of houses on both sides of the street. And even though there weren't many people on the streets due to the cold weather, she could feel that the atmosphere here was a lot more relaxed than in Rendezvous. Laura was also a little surprised to see demons and trolls walking on the streets from time to time. Vanessa was very calm. This was the most special thing about Chaos City. All races could coexist peacefully here, and this was something that couldn't be seen anywhere else on the continent. The Aiden Square is up ahead. It's the largest square in Chaos City, and it's also a business hub. You'll be able to find places to eat, drink, and play here, the coachman reminded. The vast square and the bustling commercial street in the square appeared before them. The Aiden Square was more lively than any other commercial street in Rendezvous. The horse-drawn carriage passed through the entire square and stopped at the westernmost side. Young lady, we've arrived at Mamie's. The coachman stopped the carriage and smiled. Thank you. Vanessa instructed Laura to pay the fare. Before they even got out of the carriage, a rich, spicy aroma had already wafted in through the gap in the curtains. Chapter 12:24. Ahem. Vanessa choked and coughed twice. Chili was not a rare spice to the royal family. It was just that the chefs in the palace rarely used it. A slight spicy smell could increase one's appetite, but such a rich spicy smell was a little choking to the nose. It's so spicy, Laura said with a frown. She took out a handkerchief and handed it to Vanessa before handing the money to the coachman. Miss, you came at the right time. It seems like Mr. Mac is up to something interesting today. The coachman took the money and said with a smile. Oh, Vanessa's eyes lit up when she heard that. She covered her mouth and nose with the handkerchief and got out of the carriage. The spiciness was getting stronger, but after getting used to it, it didn't smell bad. Instead, she could clearly feel the spiciness. It was indeed very different from normal chili. The aroma was even stronger than the spiciness. It was a taste that made people feel hot and happy. However, Vanessa's eyes were attracted by the strange table at the entrance of the restaurant. There was a hole in the middle of the black and gold marble table. A strange-looking red soup pot was filling the hole. Red chili floated on the soup and was still steaming. The spicy aroma was coming from the red soup pot. There was a small pot in the middle of the red soup pot. A thick white soup was boiling in the middle of the pot. 2 pieces of red tomatoes and white and green onions floated on the surface of the soup. Compared to the red soup pot, the clear soup pot in the middle seemed a little small. It was like a trembling baby in the arms of a burly man. There were already many customers standing at the entrance of the restaurant. They were all looking at the soup pot curiously. It seemed like they didn't know what it was either. Is that a witch's soup pot? Laura came out and looked at the soup pot and muttered softly. The soup pot looked a little scary and gave off a strange smell. Let's go take a look and we'll know. Vanessa couldn't wait to jump out of the carriage and walk towards the restaurant. She had already seen the plaque with the words Mamie on it. She finally came to the holy land that she had been yearning for day and night. She couldn't help but feel excited. She had already decided that the first dish she was going to eat was eggplant with garlic sauce. She had almost flipped through that vegetarian book and had eaten it many times in her dreams. Vanessa, who was wearing a veil, was wearing a plain cotton dress and a white cloak. She looked like an ordinary well-to-do young lady. On the other hand, Laura was dressed in a simple cotton-padded robe, and she didn't look like a royal at all. Is this hot pot? I don't see any fire here. Although I don't see any fire, I can already feel that my throat is on fire from the smell. Isn't there a clear soup pot in the red soup pot? I feel that the soup should taste pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to eat roast duck tonight. I've saved up money for a month, and now I can finally eat it. Many customers who had come with their own money were standing nearby and discussing curiously. Mr. Mack had said that he was going to show everyone what hot pot was tonight. So many customers had come early. However, a few waiters had brought out a large table and set it up. They had also brought out a strange-looking soup pot, but there had been no further movement after that. They didn't know what Mr. Mack was up to. Could it be that the delicious food was hidden under the red chili? Vanessa stood quietly in the crowd and listened to the conversations around her. Her eyes were shining. Among these people, there were employees who had secretly left work early to watch the new product taste test. There was also a clothing store owner who had saved up money behind his wife's back and came to eat alone. There was also an independent writer who had contributed to a gourmet magazine and was looking for inspiration. Customers of different identities and races were gathered together at this moment to harmoniously and amicably discuss Mr. Mack's new product, or to debate whether tofu pudding should be eaten sweet or savory. What a strange scene. Vanessa felt as if she had found a group. She didn't know that there were so many people who loved to eat in this world. They could even cross the boundaries of race and identity, making everyone seem to be equal. Laura stood beside Vanessa and cautiously guarded against the people around her, especially the three orcs standing not far away. She had heard that orcs were very scary people who would cook and eat children and women like wild animals. If they knew about the princess's identity, it could be disadvantageous to the princess. Amy ran over from the magic potion shop next door and familiarly greeted the customers who frequented the restaurant. Then, she knocked on the door and called out in a crisp voice, "Father, school is over." Wow, what a cute little elf. Vanessa's eyes lit up. She loved elves the most. Beautiful and elegant elves always made people feel that they were easy to get close to. When she was little, every time Princess Irina came to the palace, she would secretly go to see her. She dreamed that she could become a beautiful and elegant woman like her when she grew up. And now, there was a little girl wearing a little magician robe at the door of the restaurant. She also had silver hair and exquisite little pointy ears. She raised her little hand to knock on the door, and her soft voice was very cute. The customers also looked at Amy with doting and elation in their eyes. Every time they saw the little boss, their mood couldn't help but improve. Of course, seeing her eat was an exception. That was probably the most torturous thing in the world. "Amy." Anna opened the door with a smile. "Meow." Ugly Duckling rushed out of the door and jumped into Amy's arms. "Amy, wash your hands and get ready for dinner." Meg came out of the kitchen with a multi-tiered dining cart filled with all kinds of ingredients and looked at Amy. Okay. Amy nodded her little head. Then she looked at Meg and asked, "Father, are we having hot pot tonight?" "Yes." Meg nodded and parked the dining cart next to the table by the door. There was also a red soup hot pot on the table, but it was a few sizes smaller than the one outside. It was just right for 2 people. "Camilla, Connie, you two can eat alone tonight. This is a hot pot guide. I have already arranged the ingredients according to the order. Later, you two just have to follow the instructions and put the ingredients into the pot to cook. When it's time, immediately pick them up and eat." Meg looked at Camilla and Connie, who were standing at the side. He then took out an electronic alarm clock from his pocket and placed it on the table. "See this button? Press it, and it will start the timer. Don't forget the time. Do we still have to cook it ourselves?" Camilla frowned slightly. Not only did he want her to cut the vegetables, but now he even wanted her to cook dinner herself. Was he trying to poison her? She had cooked a pot of porridge, and Caesar had to lie down for a month before he could stand up after taking a bite. No pop-up window. Chapter 12:25. Everyone had left, leaving only Camilla and Connie in the dining room. They sat opposite each other with a bubbling pot of soup between them. They stared at each other in an eerie silence, neither of them making the first move. "Do you know how to cook?" Camilla spoke first. Connie shook her head. "We eat raw sometimes. I usually only drink fresh blood." Camilla frowned slightly. They looked at the dazzling array of ingredients on the dining cart beside them and sighed at the same time. Then, they turned to look out of the window at the people who were already sitting in a circle and mixing dipping sauces under Meg's guidance. They looked envious. "I don't think it's that difficult. Why don't we take a look at this guide first?" Connie retracted her gaze and handed a hot pot guide to Camilla. She picked one up for herself and started reading it seriously. "Tripe, pick it up with chopsticks and put it into the boiling soup. Put it down for a second, lift it up for a second. Repeat the action 8 times. Then you can eat it. Don't exceed the time limit. Otherwise, you will lose your soul." Connie read softly. Their gazes fell on the first plate on the first level of the dining cart. There were a few thin pieces of something brown and black soaked in water. They looked wrinkled. "This isn't something from a cow's stomach, is it?" Camilla frowned. As a noble vampire countess, she only drank the freshest virgin blood. Even if she had to settle for the next best thing, it had to be clean pigeon blood. Just the sound of something from a livestock's stomach sounded dirty. Meg was actually letting them eat something like this. "Yes, it's so special. I've never eaten something like this before." Connie was full of curiosity. Even when orcs ate wild animals, they would also clean the animal's organs. She had never seen orcs eating an organ alone like this. Moreover, this cooking method of doing it up and down was very special. It sounded very simple. "Aunt, why don't I try?" Connie picked up the long chopsticks eagerly. She had just learned how to use chopsticks recently. She reluctantly picked up a piece of tripe from the bowl and put it into the boiling soup. The red soup boiled as soon as the tripe entered the pot. When she picked up the chopsticks again, there was nothing left. "Oh ho!" Connie stared blankly at the empty chopsticks. Oh no, she didn't get to eat it. The red soup pot was covered with a layer of dried chili and Sichuan pepper. The thin tripe was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Connie picked up the chopsticks and dug around in the soup for a while, but she still couldn't find the missing piece of tripe. There's no need to look for it. That piece of tripe has already lost its soul. Camilla pointed at the alarm clock beside her. "Tripe, I'm sorry." Connie retracted her chopsticks apologetically. It seemed like she wasn't fated to have this piece of tripe. Moreover, she couldn't do something as difficult as doing it up and down with chopsticks. She could only give up on this novel food and pick up the hot pot guide again. Duck intestine. Pick it up with chopsticks. Do it up and down until the duck intestine rolls up. Connie was silent for a while. She stared at the long and thin duck intestine for a while. Then, she looked up at Camilla and said, "Will we starve to death?" Camilla thought seriously for a while. Then, she stared at Connie's neck. "Why don't you let me take a bite?" No, let's eat the hot pot." Connie shrunk her neck and continued to read the guide. Unlike the 2 people in the restaurant who were clueless outside the restaurant, everyone was already sitting around the table. According to Meg's instructions, they had prepared the dipping sauces that suited their tastes. The customers in the line had already surrounded the hot pot table. They looked at Meg and the others curiously. Mr. Mack said that he would show everyone what hot pot was today. Originally, everyone thought that he was going to show them how to cook. However, from the looks of it, it didn't seem like that. I didn't know Mr. Mack was so young. Vanessa, who was standing in the front row, looked at Meg curiously. She had been to the Imperial Kitchen a few times. The chefs who were in the line were all old. They were at least greasy, middle-aged men. However, this boss mag appeared to be only in his early 30s. He was tall and slender, and his skin was very good. It didn't look oily at all, and the mustache on his upper lip gave him a mature charm. He always had a warm smile on his face, which made him very likable. Also, there are so many beautiful girls. Laura stared at those girls. Every one of them was so beautiful. They were not inferior to the princess at all. Were they just waitresses in the restaurant? "Mr. Mack, you're not going to show us, are you?" Harrison asked. "Yes. Hot pot is a new way to eat good food. However, Everyone might be unfamiliar with it, so I'm going to show you today. After the hot pot is officially released, everyone will know how to eat it, Meg said with a smile. In the past, Little Boss was the only one who ate for us to see. Now, the entire restaurant is doing it. You win, Harrison complained. The other customers suddenly understood what was going to happen next. Their expressions became a little strange. First, we have to make a dipping sauces that suit our tastes. This can make the food cooked in the same hot pot better suit your taste. Meg showed everyone his dipping sauces, then picked up the guide beside him. This is a hot pot guide. It lists all the cooking methods and times. As long as you follow the guide and dip the cooked food in the dipping sauces, it will be delicious. In other words, we have to cook this hot pot ourselves? We have to do it ourselves? Can't we eat it ready-made? I'm a kitchen killer. I'm afraid I'll die from the food I cook. It sounds so troublesome. I'm 18. Can I do it? Hearing that, everyone started to talk. They were full of doubts about this new method of eating. The soul and joy of hot pot is participation. You can chat while you wait, slow down the pace of life, and enjoy the delicious food. This is the true essence of hot pot. Meg shook his head with a smile. Then, he pointed to his lips with his finger. Watch and eat. Please be quiet. Be good and be quiet. Amy looked back at everyone and said seriously, I'm super hungry. Everyone looked at the blue-purple flames dancing in Amy's hand and immediately shut their mouths. However, there was still a trace of doubt in their eyes when they looked at Meg. If they could make delicious food themselves, why would they come to Amy's? Meg withdrew his gaze from the customers and looked at everyone at the table. He smiled and said, There's nothing that hot pot can't cook. But when it comes to taste, tripe and duck intestines can rank in the top 3. Use your chopsticks to pick up a piece of tripe and put it into the boiling hot pot. Let the tripe be completely immersed in the boiling red soup. Wait for a second, then immediately take it out of the pot and let it cool down a little. Then, immediately put it back into the pot and repeat this action. Wait until the tripe starts to bubble. That's the best time. While the tripe isn't paying attention, roll it in the dipping sauces, gently blow twice, and then put it directly into your mouth. Meg chewed on the fragrant and spicy tripe. Every bite was crisp and chewy. The spiciness blossomed on the tip of his tongue. His mixed-colored hair opened up from the stimulation, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Chapter 12:26. Meg's explanation came to an abrupt end, but his expression had already surpassed any verbal expression. Those who were close to him could still hear the crisp sound of his teeth crunching the tripe. It was so beautiful that they couldn't help but imagine the chewiness of his teeth. Gulp! There was the sound of saliva being swallowed around them. What a strange way of eating. It's just a small piece of tripe, but it's so exquisite. This Mr. Mac is really an expert when it comes to eating. Vanessa secretly praised in her heart. She swallowed her saliva and looked at the various ingredients placed on the dining cart. Could it be that every ingredient had its own way of eating? The most important thing about boiling tripe is time. It'll look old if it's cooked for a long time, and it'll have a fishy smell if it's cooked for a short time. But there shouldn't be any problems if you follow the guide. Meg smiled at Mia and the others, then gestured to the small portions of tripe beside them. Everyone try it. I'll try it too. Amy carefully picked up a piece of tripe with her chopsticks, then copied Meg and put it into the pot. After a while, she picked it up again and repeated the action until the tripe bubbled. Then she dipped the tripe in the sparkling red soup into the dipping dish, then put it to her mouth and blew on it before putting it into her mouth. Amy's eyes lit up. She chewed the tripe happily with her small teeth and made little hamster noises. Her delicate little face was full of happiness. After swallowing, she immediately picked up another piece of tripe and carefully put it into the pot. She said happily, The tripe is so delicious. I want to eat more. And boiling it is so fun. Anna also accurately picked up a piece of tripe and put it into the pot to boil. She precisely followed Meg's instructions and soon finished boiling a piece of tripe and ate it. Those who had previously questioned the way to eat hot pot were now speechless. After all, this was something that a 4- or 5-year-old girl could do. It was too difficult to say that it was too difficult. Most people couldn't afford to lose face like this. Most importantly, smelling the increasingly tempting spicy aroma, watching the table of people happily chewing on the tripe, and listening to their praises from time to time, while they could only watch quietly from the side. This feeling was too painful. Duck intestines are eaten in the same way as tripe. Meg picked up a long piece of duck intestine and dipped it into the hot pot. After a few dips, the duck intestine began to curl up. He rolled it around in the dipping sauce before putting it into his mouth. The perfect heat allowed the crispness of the duck intestines to be released perfectly. The spicy red soup removed the fishy smell of the duck intestines and gave the duck intestines a wonderful taste. The sound of slurping and slurping almost made one want to chew their tongue. Oh, so spicy. Yabamia ate a mouthful of tripe, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her chest rose and fell slightly, and faint golden dragon scales appeared on her forehead. Let's have clear soup. Elizabeth gently placed her hand on Mia's wrist. A cold aura instantly enveloped her, and the dragon scales that were about to emerge retracted. Yabamia looked at Elizabeth and realized something as well. She nodded slightly. This tripe and duck intestines are so delicious. It's as if they were made by me. It gives me a sense of accomplishment. Gina picked up a piece of duck intestine and put it into the red soup. Her face was full of smiles. She was very excited to be able to participate in the cooking. Fat beef is a very important part of the meat in a hot pot. It's a high-quality eye beef. It's fat and lean, and it's shaped like an eye. That's how it gets its name. It's bright and soft in color, and it's cut into paper-thin slices. Once it's cooked in a hot pot, it can be taken out immediately. Meg picked up a paper-thin piece of fresh fat beef and put it into the boiling hot pot. The bright red color quickly turned white, and then it was covered in a layer of beautiful red. He lifted it out of the pot, rolled the steaming fat beef in the dipping sauce, and covered it with sesame oil and sauce. Then, he put it into his mouth. The fat beef had perfectly absorbed the taste of the thick soup, and the tender and delicate texture was mesmerizing. It was tender and soft, and as fine as silk. As he chewed carefully, the fragrance of the meat quickly filled his entire mouth. It was irresistible. Pig's brain, a delicacy that mortals wouldn't dare to try. Lotus root slices, the best of the vegetarian dishes in the hot pot. Enoki mushroom, the representative of the mushrooms in the hot pot. Meg would give a simple description of each dish he ate, but he refused to reveal how it tasted. He would let them experience it with confidence based on his expression. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? Is there any law here? Kill me. I don't want to suffer such a sin here. Am I the only one who envies the staff's meal? Is Mr. Max still hiring waiters? I don't want to be paid as long as I eat. Sister, count me in. The surrounding customers watched the table of people eating happily. Their scalps went numb, and their limbs went cold. They swallowed their saliva violently and felt that they were going crazy. Hot pot is so interesting, and it looks delicious. I wonder if I can eat it today. Vanessa looked at the soup pot on the table with sparkling eyes. Miss, how can you cook by yourself? This isn't something you should do, Laura said softly, shaking her head. Meat dishes can be cooked, and so can vegetarian dishes. Then, is this hot pot considered a meat dish or a vegetarian dish? Randy stood at the side, holding his chin as he fell into deep thought. Gourmet, I heard that Mr. Mac released a new product today. Are you conflicted? Are you uncomfortable? A pair of meaty hands patted Randy's shoulder from behind. Abraham squeezed out of the crowd and asked Randy with a smile. See for yourself. Whoever sees this new product will be conflicted. Randy crossed his arms and gestured to the front. Amy's is full of villains today. Abraham was shocked when he saw Amy's staff's meal. He looked around at the resentful expressions on the surrounding customers' faces and clicked his tongue in wonder. Isn't that so? It's fine if they eat first, but we can only watch. Harrison nodded in agreement. Then he squeezed out a smile and looked at Amy, who was boiling the duck intestine, and asked, Little boss, is this duck intestine crispy? Amy lifted the curled-up duck intestine and floated it in front of Harrison. Then, She swam in the dipping sauce and said with a smile, "Listen carefully. Crunch, crunch." Amy put the duck intestine into her mouth and chewed happily. Then she swallowed it and looked at Harrison, asking, "Does it sound crispy to you?" "Crispy." Harrison nodded with a strange expression and forced a smile. What could he do? He was also in despair. When could he cheat a piece of food from Little Boss? It was still a long way to go. "Miss," Laura tugged at Vanessa's sleeve and gestured for her to pay attention to Abraham, who was standing behind her on the right. "Uncle Abraham." Vanessa's eyes lit up. Under Laura's protection, she carefully moved to Abraham's side and gently tugged at his sleeve. Abraham turned his head and was slightly stunned when he saw Vanessa, who was wearing a veil. "Who is this girl?" "Uncle, it's me," Vanessa said softly. "Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 12:27. Abraham swallowed the rest of the word, but he still looked at Vanessa as if he had seen a ghost. Why are you here? If Uncle can come, why can't I?" Vanessa said confidently. Then she grumbled, "Moreover, there's such a good place. Isn't it too much for you to come here alone? You used to say that you would bring me to eat all the good food. Isn't this place too far? Even if I wanted to bring you here, your father wouldn't agree." Abraham felt a little wronged. Although he used to bring Vanessa around to look for good food, that was in Rodu, after all. Furthermore, there are many powerhouses protecting them secretly. However, judging from Vanessa's attire, she most likely ran out on her own. He wondered if His Majesty knew that she had already come to Chaos City. This lass had always been obedient. He didn't know what kind of guts she had to come to Chaos City. "It's all right. I'm already here. When we go back after dinner, you can send a message to my father. Tell him that I'm eating and drinking here, and that he doesn't have to worry. We'll go back when we're done eating," Vanessa said smilingly. Indeed, Abraham's smile was a little bitter. This lass had indeed snuck out on her own. Now, she was even pushing the blame to him. This was going to be troublesome. "Uncle, who's this lady?" Randy turned around to look at Vanessa curiously. Although her face was covered by a veil, her golden eyes were exceptionally bright and pure, just like a clear spring. He could not help but take a few more glances at her. "My niece." Abraham took a step forward and blocked Randy's view. Although he felt that this young man was rather interesting after interacting with him during this period of time, he couldn't have any ideas about Vanessa, even if it was just a little spark. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to answer to His Majesty when he went back. "This lady is beautiful and elegant. She really doesn't look like you at all," Randy said with a smile. "Nice to meet you. I'm Vanessa." Vanessa introduced herself generously. Although she was not very willing to interact with others because of her teeth, she felt a sense of relaxation after coming here, as if she had found an organization. She wanted to get to know some people who also liked good food and make friends with them. "Hello, Miss Windsor. I'm Randy, a food critic." Randy smiled. It was rare to see such a clean and elegant lady. Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she asked curiously, "Oh, since you're a food critic, which food magazine do you write for?" She had read almost all of the gourmet magazines on the Northern continent, and as long as they were of decent quality, she wouldn't miss a single issue. Randy shrugged and humbly said, "I recently started a column on carnivore, but it's more amateur." "Carnivore?" Vanessa pondered for a moment, and her eyes suddenly lit up. "I remember now. Are you the carnivore Randy who swore to bring the most delicious meat to the readers? You've read my articles?" I read every issue. Mr. Randy's articles are all very interesting. I didn't expect to meet a loyal fan here. It's really touching," Randy said excitedly. He suddenly felt a little smug. He didn't expect there to be a beautiful young lady who liked his words so much. She probably already had a crush on him. Vanessa has a habit of reading every issue of all the gourmet magazines. Abraham interrupted Randy's imagination. I see." Randy was stunned and touched his nose awkwardly. In that case, all the gourmets on the Northern continent were lucky enough to enjoy this young lady's follower treatment. "Yes, I like to see you guys sharing your food. Words can give people more imagination and let people know more about food. Vanessa nodded with a smile. You'd better think about how you're going to submit your article for this month to the editor first, Abraham said gloatingly. Abraham gloated. This guy had always bragged about his literary talents in front of him, but now he was saying that his literary talents were mediocre in front of a little girl. He had to be on guard against him. It's all right. I'll definitely be able to write it when I get back today. Randy waved his hand nonchalantly. He was very confident in himself and didn't continue to pay attention to Vanessa. Instead, he continued to watch Meg and the rest eat hot pot. The hot pot lasted for almost an hour. There were already a few layers of onlookers at the restaurant's entrance. Many passers-by thought there was a duel and came to watch the show. However, they realized that this large group of people was actually watching others eat. Furthermore, they were watching with relish. They cried out that they had been tricked and then watched with relish. Meg, who was sweating profusely from eating, held a colander and swam around the pot. He put the last few pieces of small potatoes into Amy and Anna's bowls and officially announced the end of dinner for the day. The moment he put down the colander, Meg only felt satisfied. He had never had such a satisfying hot pot meal before. The best ingredients, the rich soup pot, the perfect dipping sauce, and the people who wanted to eat hot pot together. This was a perfect hot pot meal. Hot pot is so delicious, Amy said happily as she chewed on the potatoes. Yabamiya and the rest were also very satisfied. Although the mealtime was twice as long as usual, this novel way of eating was indeed very interesting, and the taste was rich and delicious. It's so satisfying. In the restaurant, Connie slumped on the chair with a satisfied smile. The tip of her tongue was still a little numb, and all the pores on her body seemed to have opened up. It was as if she had just experienced a satisfying battle, and her body and mind were in a state of extreme pleasure. Other than the tripe and duck intestine, the two of them had finished all the other dishes. So, although the pig's brain is a little stupid, it's unusually delicious. It's just like tofu pudding. Camilla was still reminiscing about the pig's brain that she had just eaten. If that's the case, will my brain be very delicious too? Connie was deep in thought. It might be even more delicious, Camilla said, after thinking seriously. The two of them looked at each other's brains and fell silent. Everyone, please wait in line for a moment. We'll take a short break, and we'll open for business at 5 sharp. Meg stood up and said to the surrounding customers. Mia and the rest had already started to clear the table. The crowd dispersed, and soon there were 2 long lines. Now I understand why so many people are willing to wait in line. Such delicious food is worth a wait. Vanessa stood in the line with an expectant smile on her face. Chapter 1228. The hot pot had refreshed the customer's fixed mindset of only eating and not eating. It had also successfully proved that the customers could also get delicious food if they participated. The novel way of eating and the delicious experience that made people salivate crazily raised the customers' expectations for the hot pot to the extreme. However, what made people feel uncomfortable was that although they were salivating, they had no chance to taste the hot pot tonight. Because the designated hot pot area was still under renovation, the specific opening date had not been set. I think Mr. Mac did it on purpose. This guy is very bad. Randy sighed. Although he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Mr. Mac has a creative way of cooking that is like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky. He wants the customers to accept and learn quickly. He personally demonstrates it. Isn't this the quality that an excellent chef and restaurant owner should have? Vanessa praised. She looked at Meg, who had turned and walked into the restaurant, with admiration in her eyes. He already has a child, Abraham said carefully. Abraham asked carefully, trying to figure out what she was thinking. If she fell in love with a cook, it would be a very bad thing. But there are so many good ladies lining up to become Little Boss's stepmother. Randy's voice was filled with envy. Yes, that little elf is so cute. Vanessa could not help but nod. She was so adorable when she saw Amy eating just now. Cough, cough. Well, what do I want to eat today? Uncle's treat. Abraham coughed dryly and changed the topic. I want to eat eggplant with garlic sauce. It's the dish that Derek, the gourmet from the previous issue of Vegetarianism, wrote about. I've been thinking about it for half a month. I've even dreamed about it several times, Vanessa blurted out, her eyes full of anticipation. She had left the palace because of this dish. That's indeed a delicacy. Abraham nodded. He had also been obsessed with eggplant with garlic sauce for some time. Vegetarianism. Randy raised his eyebrows. As a loyal fan of carnivory, he did not expect the lady in front of him to be bewitched by a vegetarian demon. This would not do. There was still a long way to go to promote carnivory, and he had to start from the front. Miss Windsor, as a carnivore, I'm actually more willing to recommend you to try Mamie's meat. Mr. Mac's beef kebabs can be said to be the best in the barbecue world. The spicy grilled fish subverts your imagination of grilled fish. The fatty but not greasy Peking roast duck, the spicy and sour steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, the beggar's chicken born in a mud shell. Meat is the main character of this restaurant, and also the main character of our lives, Randy said sincerely. Although I think I can only trust half of what this guy says. What he said is true. In Mamie's, meat is the real star. Abraham nodded. After coming here, he had put on another round of weight. It was all because of that damned meat. But I still want to try the eggplant with garlic sauce first. Vanessa smiled. Of course, I won't miss any of the delicacies in the restaurant, whether it's meat or vegetarian. That's a wise choice. Abraham nodded. He liked Vanessa because her personality was similar to his. As long as it was a delicacy, they would not care who made it or what ingredients were used. They would just eat it. But Randy still tried to say something. Mr. Randy, have you tried the eggplant with garlic sauce before? Vanessa asked Randy. Yes, I have. Randy nodded and said awkwardly, but that's because the name of the dish says fish. I thought it was a meat dish. Is it delicious? It's really fragrant. Randy nodded with a complicated expression. Although he was unwilling to admit it, as a gourmet, he did not want to lie about delicacies. Then, after I eat the eggplant with garlic sauce, I'll try the delicacies that Mr. Randy just recommended, Vanessa said with a smile. She had a good impression of Randy's honesty. Meg and the others packed up and returned to the restaurant. Seeing Connie and Camilla staring at each other's heads, he could not help but feel puzzled. What are you doing? We're thinking about whose head is more delicious. Connie looked up at Meg. Isn't a pig's head very delicious? The restaurant suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at Connie and Camilla with a complicated expression. It seems like your heads are still comparable to a pig's. Meg nodded. Both of them heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. If they could not even compare to a pig's, it would be too embarrassing. I'm full. I'm leaving. Camilla got up and walked towards the kitchen. Goodbye, Sister Camilla. Amy waved at Camilla. Then, she suddenly thought of something. Are you coming again tonight? No. Camilla's face turned red immediately. She quickened her pace and disappeared into a cloud of black fog in the blink of an eye. Everyone looked at Meg curiously. There seemed to be a lot of information hidden in Amy's words. I'm going to take a shower and change my clothes. Everyone, get ready to open for business. Meg walked towards the staircase quietly. The more he explained, the more confused he would become. The best plan was to escape. Amy, did Camilla sleep in the restaurant last night? Mia's gossipy soul had already started to burn. Everyone looked at Amy curiously. No. Amy shook her head. It seemed like she had to keep this a secret for her father. Everyone did not quite believe Amy's contradictory words. However, they were about to open for business, so it was not appropriate for them to ask any more questions. Connie, send this Buddha jumps over the wall to your master. Then, you're done for the day. Meg went downstairs and packed a serving of Buddha jumps over the wall from the kitchen. He handed it to Connie and said, Learn well from your master. Okay. Connie took the Buddha jumps over the wall and nodded solemnly. I promised to complete the mission. Meg looked at Connie's back and couldn't help but remind him, also, remember to go through the main entrance this time. Don't keep climbing over people's walls. Connie turned around and said helplessly, but my master asked me to climb over the wall. He said he wanted to test how far I can go today. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed like Connie's master was not simple. He actually used the Bathai prison as his disciples' training ground. He was the deputy warden, so he could not say anything. He waved his hand and said, "All right, then we'll do as your master said." Connie went out fully armed. Meg looked at the time. It was exactly 5 o'clock. He walked towards the restaurant's entrance and pushed open the restaurant's door. He looked at the long line of customers outside and smiled. "Welcome to Amy's." Chapter 1229. Randy, Abraham, Vanessa, and Laura happened to share a table. Vanessa looked around the restaurant curiously. The wooden railings cleverly separated the restaurant, preventing the awkwardness of having to sit back to back. There were green plants in transparent aquaponics bottles hanging on the railings, and exquisite murals painted on the walls, depicting the sceneries of various parts of the Northern continent. What an exquisite restaurant! Vanessa couldn't help but gasp in admiration. It wasn't resplendent, but every detail was exquisite and moving. The comfortable color of the wood and the tender green plants made one feel calm and peaceful in the midst of it. What was even more amazing was that the customers here would consciously share a table. The humans and orcs sat together, and the elves and demons sat opposite each other. Surprisingly, there weren't any intense arguments. Some even greeted each other as if they had already become friends. Such a scene could never be seen in Rodu. Or rather, it couldn't be seen after exiting this restaurant. Laura was also looking around in surprise. At the same time, she was wary of the orc sitting next to her. If this tall and big guy wanted to do something to the princess, she could only hug his leg and buy some time for the princess to escape. "Is there no private room?" "Miss doesn't like to eat with others," Laura asked softly. "Mamie's doesn't provide private rooms, and if you can't gather 4 people, you can only share a table with strangers," Randy explained. He glanced at Vanessa's veil. "This young lady's eyes are so beautiful. Why does she have to wear this veil? Does it matter?" Abraham looked at Vanessa with a hint of worry in his eyes. He knew about Vanessa's teeth problem, and that she almost didn't participate in any large-scale palace banquets in the past few years. However, Randy was right. Mamie's didn't provide private rooms, and Mr. Mack wouldn't specially cook for Vanessa. This was his restaurant. He set the rules, and even the city lord of Chaos City had to follow them here. "It's all right, let's eat here. I like this environment." Vanessa shook her head and removed her veil. Her delicate face and fair skin made Randy, who was sitting opposite her, fall into a trance for a moment. "Me?" Mississippi Laura stared at Vanessa with her mouth slightly agape. This was the first time in 3 years that Vanessa had taken off her veil in front of others. Laura was gratified, but at the same time, she was worried that she would be in danger if someone recognized her identity. Abraham was also slightly taken aback, but soon revealed a gratified smile. All these years, His Majesty had spent a lot of effort to help this lass walk out of her feelings of inferiority. He did not expect that after coming here, she would take off her veil on her own. This could be considered a good thing. Vanessa pursed her lips and smiled, not revealing her teeth. She put down the hand under the table and grabbed the hem of her shirt, feeling a little strange. Here, she felt relaxed and happy. She had gotten rid of the shackles of her identity as the princess of the Roth Empire, and was just like an ordinary girl. Even if she had some flaws, it did not seem unacceptable, right? Take a look and see what you want to eat. Feel free to order. Abraham opened the menu in front of Vanessa. "Uncle, are you treating us today?" Randy said with a smile. "Not including you." Abraham shook his head with a smile. "I knew you were a petty fellow." Randy pursed his lips, but he was not angry. He looked at Vanessa, who was looking at the menu seriously, and said, "Miss Vanessa, although your beauty has put the flowers to shame, I still suggest you try the savory tofu pudding. There are only 150 servings per meal, and it has become the most sought-after beauty product for women in Chaos City." Oh, Vanessa's eyes lit up. There was a delicacy that could make her beautiful after eating it? Tofu pudding. Of course, you should eat sweet tofu pudding. Abraham was about to say something when he suddenly remembered the king and queen forbade Vanessa from eating sweets. This lass loved sweets the most, and that was why her teeth had become like this. He stopped abruptly and reluctantly said, Of course, savory tofu pudding is also very good. You can have savory tofu pudding. Uncle, you have turned over a new leaf today and become a savory fan too? Randy looked at Abraham in shock. Usually, when it came to ordering tofu pudding, the two of them would argue. He did not expect Abraham to take the initiative to recommend Miss Vanessa to eat savory tofu pudding today. Vanessa had already found the picture of sweet tofu pudding in the pictures. The golden red gravy was poured over the tender white tofu pudding, and she could taste the sweetness at a glance. Her eyes lit up immediately. This sweet tofu pudding looks delicious. Young mistress, you can't eat sweets anymore. Laura shook her head with worry written all over her little face. The royal doctor had said that if the princess continued to eat sweets, she might lose all her teeth. Vanessa's gaze was already completely captivated. She stuck out a finger and pleaded, I'll just have one bowl. Just one bowl. Abraham and Laura were both hesitant. They could not resist Vanessa's coquettish behavior the most. She was really a little cutie that made people feel conflicted. Tofu pudding is so delicious, and it can make you look good after eating it. Why don't you let Miss Vanessa have one bowl? It's not something that you can eat every day, Randy said with a smile. Although she did not want to eat sweet tofu pudding, seeing how coquettish she was, the taste did not seem to matter anymore. Then, you can only have it once, Abraham said seriously. Since Vanessa had come to Chaos City, he had to be responsible for her. Apart from sending her back to Rhodes safely, he also had to ensure her basic necessities during her stay in Chaos City. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a face to go back and see the king. Vanessa nodded profusely. Then, she smiled at Randy and said, Thank you. Randy was stunned when he saw Vanessa's black and yellow teeth when she smiled. She had an angelic face, but her teeth were like those of an 80-year-old man, or even worse. He was a little shocked. Vanessa saw Randy's expression and suddenly realized that she was not wearing a veil. She quickly covered her mouth with her little hand and lowered her head. Laura glared at Randy. This fellow was the same as those fellows. He had hurt the princess again. Abraham sighed in his heart. Randy's expression was just a normal reaction. However, Vanessa's heart was a little fragile. She must have been hurt again. Randy quickly realized his rudeness and apologetically said, I'm sorry, Miss Vanessa. I didn't mean to offend you. Vanessa lowered her head and remained silent for a while. She loosened her grip on the hem of her dress and looked up with a forced smile. She shook her head and said, It's all right. I'm already used to it. Randy was silent. He did not know what to say to comfort her. Vanessa Andre, female, 16 years old. Severe dental caries accompanied by long-term abnormal corrosion. In the kitchen, Meg looked at the young lady sitting opposite Abraham and narrowed his eyes. Our little princess doesn't seem to have good teeth. Chapter 1230. The Andre family represented the highest authority in the Roth Empire. Of course, the huge Andre family had countless descendants, but King Andre only had one princess. She happened to be 16 years old this year, and her name was Vanessa. Meg had just finished reading all the information about the Roth Empire today. This princess, who was doted on by the king, rarely appeared in the public eye in recent years. As she wasn't a key character, there wasn't much information about her in the information. It was only said that it could be due to some hidden illness. Now, Meg could confirm what that hidden illness was. It was the dental decay in her eyes. To a beautiful young lady, having dental decay in her eyes that affected her looks was indeed unacceptable. Meg sized up Vanessa for a while. He had to admit that the Andre family's genes were indeed very strong. There was the tall and handsome Sean, the melancholy Josh, and the beautiful Vanessa. Except for the monkey-like third prince who seemed to have grown a little crooked. The king just sent someone to ask me to go to Rhodes a few days ago. Why did this princess come to Chaos City by herself? What's the purpose of this trip? A few questions arose in Meg's mind. The peace talks between the various races were about to start, and it was an eventful time. With Princess Vanessa's status, she should be staying in the palace obediently. It wasn't a good idea to come to Chaos City. On the other side, Vanessa and the rest had also ordered their food and were waiting quietly for it to be served. Because of what happened earlier, the atmosphere between them was a little awkward. Randy wanted to say something to ease the awkwardness. For example, he didn't mind that Miss Vanessa's teeth were rotten, or even if her teeth were rotten, her smile was still beautiful. However, after thinking about it seriously, he chose to remain silent. Those words were obviously hurtful and wouldn't have any consolation effect. Vanessa's emotions had already calmed down slowly. Compared to those people who laughed behind her back and didn't hide the mockery in their eyes, Randy's performance was already considered very restrained. Besides, he really didn't have any hostility. However, she still felt a little inferior about her rotten teeth. Her appearance would indeed scare others. Abraham was also sitting quietly as he carefully observed Vanessa. This little girl was very active when she was young and would often pester him to take her out to eat good food. In recent years, she had slowly become quiet and reticent due to her teeth. Furthermore, they would often only see each other once in half a year. If this trip to Chaos City could be resolved, then leaving the palace wouldn't be so bad after all. Here's your eggplant with garlic sauce. The sweet tofu pudding will be served soon. Please enjoy. Yabamiya placed 2 bowls of rice and a plate of eggplant with garlic sauce in front of Vanessa and Laura. Thank you, Vanessa said politely, but her eyes were completely attracted by the fish on the plate in front of her. The fish was split in half, and there were beautiful cuts on its body. The thick golden red sauce covered the fish meat. A rich meaty aroma assaulted her nostrils. Even the meaty aroma she had tasted before could not compare to this aroma. It smells even better than the aroma I smelled in my dreams, Vanessa murmured. She knew that this plate wasn't filled with fish, but an eggplant. However, because of the chef's exquisite knife skills and unique cooking method, this eggplant looked no different from a fish. She had imagined this eggplant with garlic sauce in her dreams many times, but when it was placed in front of her, she realized that her imagination was not enough. Isn't this fish? Laura was also looking at the plate curiously. She had heard the princess mention eggplant with garlic sauce countless times, and it was the reason why she dared to leave the palace. They had crossed half the continent to come to Chaos City for this eggplant with garlic sauce. It was crazy. Try the eggplant with garlic sauce that you have been thinking about day and night, Abraham said with a smile. Vanessa answered, and eagerly picked up a piece of eggplant with her chopsticks and put it into her mouth. The soft eggplant melted in her mouth, and then the 4 flavors, sour, spicy, sweet, and salty, exploded in her mouth at the same time. Her calm taste buds were activated instantly. It was like a volcano that had been dormant for many years suddenly erupting with lava, stimulating her tongue crazily. Every flavor was so prominent, but when they blended together, they were so harmonious that one could not help but indulge in it. Her taste buds went from resisting to welcoming crazily. After experiencing a crazy taste feast, she swallowed gently, and a lingering aroma lingered in her mouth. Oh, what incredible taste! Vanessa could not help but praise. Even though she had read Derek's article countless times, and imagined the taste countless times, when she really tasted the eggplant with garlic sauce, she suddenly realized that no words could describe the taste accurately. The excitement and craziness at the tip of her tongue, and the lingering aroma, all showed the unique charm of this vegetarian dish. Vanessa knew that she had been completely won over. The salty and delicious eggplant with garlic sauce paired with a bowl of white rice was a simple combination, but it blossomed into an incredible taste. Vanessa, who had only eaten a few bites of dry rations on the journey, could not stop eating. Is it really that good? Laura looked at the princess, who was usually very picky about food, and could not help but be a little puzzled when she saw how happy and excited the princess was. Laura, you should eat too, Vanessa said to Laura as she looked up from her bowl. I'm not hungry. You can eat first. Laura quickly shook her head. According to the rules, she was not allowed to sit at the same table as the princess, let alone eat together. It's a rare opportunity to taste such delicacies. It would be a pity to miss it, Vanessa pushed another bowl of rice in front of Laura and said with a smile, "This is an order. Eat, it's my treat today anyway," Abraham said with a smile. He knew that Vanessa treated this palace maid who had grown up with her very well, and he did not care who he ate with at the same table. Since both the princess and the duke had spoken, Laura did not dare to refuse, even though she was unwilling. She picked up a piece of eggplant with her chopsticks and put it on top of the rice, and then put the eggplant and rice in her mouth together. Laura, who was not looking forward to it, suddenly brightened up. The soft eggplant seemed to have melted on top of the rice, and the sour, spicy, sweet, and salty soup mixed into the fragrant rice. The more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. It's just an eggplant that no one likes. How did it become so delicious? Lola's heart was filled with shock. She had tasted the delicacies cooked by many famous chefs when she was with the princess, but she had to admit that none of them could compare to this. Chapter 1231. Vanessa's joyful expression didn't last long as the deliciousness blossomed in her mouth. The sourness and spiciness irritated her teeth, and the stinging pain forced her to put down the chopsticks in her hand. She covered her mouth and frowned. "Vanessa, what's wrong?" Abraham asked with concern. His expression also became a little nervous. Was there something wrong with the dish? "Oh no," Laura reacted quickly and said anxiously, "Miss, are your teeth hurting again? You can't eat anything that's too strong." "I'm fine. I just need to drink some water." Vanessa shook her head. The stinging pain would occur from time to time. Eating a light diet was too much for her. "Miss, can we have a glass of water?" Laura stood up and walked quickly to Yabamiya. She was a little anxious. "Okay, please wait a moment." Yabamiya glanced at Vanessa and turned to the kitchen. She explained the guest's request to Meg and then handed a glass of warm water to Laura. "Thank you," Laura said gratefully. She quickly returned to her seat and handed the glass of water to Vanessa. "Even eating eggplant with garlic sauce gives you a toothache. This dental decay is really serious." Meg was deep in thought. It seemed that the awareness of brushing one's teeth in the morning and evening was really important. Otherwise, even a noble princess would be tortured by dental decay. Among the customers who ate in the restaurant, there was a high proportion of varying degrees of dental decay. Ding! New mission. Please treat Vanessa's dental decay within a month and restore her ability to taste delicious food. Mission success. Receive a durian pizza recipe. Mission failure. Receive the same degree of dental decay as Vanessa's. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. "What the fuck?" Meg raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but complain in his mind. "System, isn't this mission too much? Her father and her two brothers have tried to kill me time and time again, and they still haven't given up on the idea. I'm already merciful enough not to put anything bad in her food, but you actually want me to treat her teeth? Are you stupid, or do you think I'm stupid? Host, you shouldn't let her bear the consequences of other people's mistakes. This is illogical. Moreover, as a kind person who truly loves delicious food, she should be treated well and continue on the path of enjoying delicious food," the system said calmly. Mag looked at Vanessa, who was rinsing her mouth with warm water. He couldn't deny that she was indeed a kind-hearted person from the information he had read. "But I'm a chef. As a candidate for the god of cookery, how can I steal a dentist's job? That's very unprofessional. System, where are your professional ethics? Letting the customers eat happily is the purpose of my service. No, your services. Host, please don't deviate from the topic. I can treat her teeth, but you have to give me a set of modern dental equipment." Given her status, the king can invite the best doctors and healing magic casters in the world for her. Since they can't do anything, why do you think a chef like me can do it? Meg pursed his lips. The knowledge in his mind didn't allow him to clean Vanessa's teeth and mend her decayed teeth. The system was silent for a long time before saying, "I can sponsor you with a bottle of Crest." Scram! Meg flipped the kebab in his hand and looked at Vanessa, deep in thought. As the only princess of the Roth Empire, if it was just a simple tooth decay, the royal doctors would have already cured it. The real problem was the long-term abnormal corrosion detected by the omniscient door, letting a chef do the dentist's job. This stupid system is really fickle. Meg shook his head. He really couldn't think of any other way except to give her a bottle of Crest. After rinsing her mouth, Vanessa's pain subsided a lot. However, she was in a dilemma when she looked at the eggplant with garlic sauce. The scrumptious eggplant with garlic sauce was in line with all her imagination and even exceeded her expectations. However, she couldn't enjoy the wonderful taste. The pain in her teeth made her unable to continue enjoying this delicious food. Randy looked at Vanessa and could not help but feel sorry for her. He did not have many thoughts about Vanessa, but he was more concerned about this niece of his because he often ate with Abraham during this period of time, and they were more familiar with each other. He still couldn't forget that charming lady boss. Perhaps one day, he would look for her again and eat the noodles she made. "Miss Vanessa, why don't you have the soft tofu pudding?" Randy put the bowl of savory tofu pudding that he hadn't touched in front of Vanessa with a smile and said, "Try the savory one first and then the sweet one later. You won't be hungry at night." This, Vanessa wanted to reject. "Eat it. It's rare that he's so kind as to give the tofu pudding to someone else. It's better for you to eat something soft." Abraham smiled and nodded at Randy. "It's your treat," Randy mouthed. Abraham's face darkened, but the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "Thank you." Vanessa looked at Randy and smiled again. This time, she didn't hide her mouth. Her black teeth also had some incomplete beauty. Her gaze was quickly attracted by the tofu pudding in front of her. The white and tender tofu pudding was placed in a small bowl with a spoonful of orange-red sauce and some chopped pickled vegetables. The faint fragrance of beans wafted over, and it was refreshing and pleasant. So cute. Vanessa couldn't wait to scoop the tofu pudding with the spoon. The spoon cut the tofu pudding open easily, and the snow-white cut was quickly covered by the orange-red sauce. The tofu pudding swayed slightly in the spoon, showing off its wonderful elasticity. After looking at it for a while, she reluctantly put the tofu pudding into her mouth. Once the tofu pudding entered her mouth, she almost didn't need to chew it, and it melted by itself. The sweet and fragrant tofu pudding, the salty pickled vegetables, and the sauce blended together perfectly. The refreshing taste was given a rich taste by the sauce, but it didn't cover up the bean fragrance. The tofu pudding was like a mischievous elf as it circled around in his mouth, gently licking his injured teeth. His aching teeth felt a lot more comfortable, and it slid down his throat with a sizzle. The faint bean fragrance lingered in her mouth, and it was full of a refreshing feeling. So delicious. What a wonderful tofu pudding. Vanessa was pleasantly surprised. The pain in her teeth had mostly subsided. Eating this tofu pudding didn't hurt her teeth, and it seemed to have the effect of reducing the pain. Vanessa couldn't stop eating the refreshing and savory tofu pudding. She ate one mouthful after another, and the bowl was soon empty. "Your sweet tofu pudding." Yabamiya gently placed a sweet tofu pudding in front of Vanessa. Double monthly votes activated. Monthly votes, please. Chapter 1232. Vanessa had just tasted the savory tofu pudding, and she couldn't resist the sweet tofu pudding in front of her. The golden red syrup drizzled onto the tofu pudding, and it was as if the tofu pudding was wrapped in a beautiful layer of sugar, making it look so tempting. The sweet aroma had already drifted over, and with the syrup's addition, even the fragrance of the beans seemed to have become more intense. The three people at the table all looked at Vanessa at the same time. She had just given up on the eggplant with garlic sauce that she couldn't get out of her head due to her toothache. If she were to eat the sweet tofu pudding now, it would be no different from adding fuel to the fire. Vanessa was clearly aware of that, too, so she looked at the sweet tofu pudding with a conflicted expression on her face. Her rationality told her that she had to follow the doctor's instructions and stop eating the tofu pudding. However, the gluttony in her stomach kept tempting her to have another bite, even if it was just a small bite. "I'll just have one bite." In the end, her gluttony won over her rationality, and she picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of the sweet tofu pudding in her mouth. The The sweetness instantly blossomed in her mouth. The refreshing sweetness wasn't sticky at all, and the bean fragrance was completely stimulated by the sweetness. It was a delightful and exciting taste. It's delicious. Vanessa loved this taste. The perfect amount of sweetness gave the tofu pudding a completely different flavor, and it wasn't inferior to the savory tofu pudding in any way. It was like the most delicious piece of candy, and she couldn't bear to swallow it just like that. However, before she could savor it carefully, it slid down her throat and down her throat. She closed her eyes and savored the lingering aftertaste in her mouth. Vanessa opened her eyes and scooped up another spoonful of tofu pudding. "Young mistress, didn't you say you'd just have one bite?" Laura reminded her carefully. The princess couldn't stop eating sweets, but she really couldn't continue eating sweets. Otherwise, her toothache would worsen. "I want to stop too, but my body won't allow it," Vanessa said with a resigned expression as she shoved the tofu pudding into her mouth again. She had eaten many candies before. The candies that came from all over the northern continent would all be sent to her palace for her to choose from. Only those that she didn't want would be distributed to the other palaces. However, there had never been anything that could compare to this sweet tofu pudding. The syrup and the tofu pudding seemed to be one whole entity, and they were like the most exquisite and delicious candy with the most incredible texture. This girl, Abraham, looked at Vanessa, who was completely immersed in the sweet tofu pudding. He couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. The way she ate really hadn't changed at all from when she was young. As long as she saw good food, she could always immerse herself in it. However, from today onwards, she could only eat savory tofu pudding. There was only one bowl of sweet tofu pudding. Vanessa put down the empty bowl in her hand and couldn't help but praise, "I think Mr. Mac is really the best chef in the world. Only he can make such incredible and delicious food." Randy nodded in agreement with Vanessa's words. "In my 28 years of life, Mr. Mac is indeed the best chef I've ever met. Not only is his culinary skills superb, but his crazy creative spirit is also unmatched. Every new dish he makes subverts my knowledge and imagination. That's why I've decided to settle down in Chaos City. As long as I stay at Amy's, I'll be able to taste new delicacies frequently. There's no other restaurant like this on the northern continent," Abraham said with a smile. He was very proud of his unique taste. "I've decided. I'm going to settle down in Chaos City too," Vanessa said with a serious expression. "Io, my little ancestor, you can't do that. I'll have to send you back in a few days." Abraham quickly shook his head. He was still having a headache about how to write a letter to the king at night. If this last were to settle down in Chaos City, he wouldn't be as carefree as before. "Laura, eat this eggplant with garlic sauce," Vanessa said to Laura. She picked up the remaining half bowl of rice and ate it pitifully. She couldn't eat eggplant with garlic sauce, so she had to eat some rice. Luckily, this rice was very delicious without any side dishes. The more she chewed, the more delicious it was. Laura nodded. The princess really couldn't eat eggplant with garlic sauce anymore, so she had to finish the rest. Although she felt sorry for the princess, the eggplant with garlic sauce was really delicious. Vanessa ordered another bowl of rice for her. The four of them finished their dinner one after another. Abraham paid the bill and was about to leave with Vanessa. He thought for a moment and gestured for Vanessa to wait while he walked straight to the kitchen. Abraham stopped at the kitchen door and looked at Meg. "Mr. Mac, do you have time to talk to me?" Meg turned off the fire and scooped the fried rice into a bowl for Barbara. He then turned to Abraham and said, "What do you want to talk to me about, Duke?" Abraham lowered his voice and said, "I have a niece who really likes to eat your food, but her teeth aren't very good. She can't eat spicy food and can't chew through things that are too hard. Next time we come to eat, can you add less spicy seasoning to her portion or cook it a little softer?" "I see." Meg pondered. He looked at Abraham and said, "I know a little about dental care. Why don't you bring her here after the restaurant closes tonight, and I'll take a look at her. Mr. Mac, you know how to treat dental problems?" Abraham looked at Meg in surprise. "I've always insisted on making sure my customers eat healthily," Meg said calmly. Abraham thought about it again. Whether it was the beautifying effect of the tofu pudding or the anti-hair loss effect of the Buddha jumps over the wall, Meg had shown abilities that ordinary doctors and healing magicians couldn't reach. Maybe he really had a way to relieve or even treat Vanessa's toothache. Okay, then I'll bring her here after the restaurant closes. Abraham nodded and turned to leave. System, I don't want crest anymore. Make me a Yunnan Bai Yao, the better kind, and a soft toothbrush, Meg said in his mind. Sponsorship exchange successful. Making long-lasting Chinese medicine toothpaste. Also, check her teeth. Even if you don't help treat her, you have to at least help me determine her condition, Meg continued. Professional oral examination fee. 555 copper coins per session. Huh. Meg rolled his eyes. This guy really didn't forget to make money at all times. He curled his lips and said, go ahead. For the sake of his teeth, he had to treat Vanessa's teeth. He didn't want to become strangers because of a mouthful of rotten teeth and delicious food. Saliva, foreign matter attached to teeth, blood extraction successful. X-ray lens completed. Analyzing results. M. Chapter 1233. Are you going to look for Mr. Mac tonight? Vanessa was a little surprised to hear Abraham's words in the horse-drawn carriage. Yes. Mr. Mac said he has some insights into oral care, so he agreed to take a look at you. Abraham nodded. He was also a little suspicious of Mr. Mac's unprofessional behavior. But he's a chef, so he might not be able to give you any good advice. He can make such delicious food. I believe in him, Vanessa said with a smile. Although she had only eaten a few mouthfuls of the eggplant with garlic sauce that she had been longing for, the 2 servings of tofu pudding were still enough to satisfy her. She now had a clear understanding of Mr. Mac's culinary skills. A gourmet who could overturn the impossible with amazing creativity and imagination was the perfect gift that God had given to a foodie. She had to admit that she had been captured. That full menu was like a treasure, waiting for her to slowly unearth it so that she could enjoy the joy and enjoyment brought by the delicious food. Tell me, what do you want me to say to His Majesty so that you can stay in Chaos City for a few more days? Abraham asked as he looked at Vanessa dotingly. Abraham had 3 sons, but none of them had a son, so he had doted on Vanessa since she was young and often brought her out of the palace to play. In the past few years, he had seen Vanessa's gloomy personality, quiet personality, and lack of smile on her face, which made his heart ache. He didn't expect that this lass would become a completely different person after coming to Chaos City. Not only did she become more talkative, but she also had a smile on her face again. She had become a lot more cheerful all of a sudden, which surprised him. Vanessa thought seriously for a while and said, just tell him that I'm having a lot of fun here, and I plan to stay for a while longer. After that, I'll go back obediently. I'll be with you, Uncle, so you don't have to worry about my safety at all. You know very well what your father is worried about, Abraham said with a smile. It was similar to what he had in mind. He would send a letter back to Rodu so that the king and queen wouldn't have to worry. The horse-drawn carriage drove toward Abraham's mansion in the city. A black shadow appeared on a roof beside the street and looked in the direction of the horse-drawn carriage before disappearing without a trace. The results of the system's inspection quickly appeared. Compared to the general description of the omniscient door, the results of the system's inspection were more professional. Saliva is abnormally acidic and corrosive to tooth enamel. The tooth exhibits an acidic substance deposit that is highly corrosive. There are also a variety of abnormal bacteria. It was accompanied by severe periodontitis, bleeding, and swelling of the gums. The oral mucosa is severely damaged. There are bleeding spots. The tooth structure is severely damaged, the tooth enamel is severely corroded, and the ability to chew is impaired. Blood analysis results. The blood is obviously acidic. Meg looked at the report in his mind and was secretly speechless. It seemed that the little princess's dental problems were not simply caused by eating sugar. After all, eating too much sugar would cause diabetes, but he had never heard that it would cause the blood and saliva to become acidic. Furthermore, the omniscient door did not indicate that she had gastro problems, so the possibility of gastric acid reflux could be ruled out. As a person without any medical knowledge, this report did not provide much help to Meg other than making him aware of the thorny problem. If sour doesn't work, then add some alkali to neutralize it. Meg began to use scientific thinking to solve the problem. Host, the system needs to remind you that the acidity of the blood will not be affected by the food intake. It is a completely different concept from neutralizing gastric acid, the system's voice sounded. Then why don't you give her an infusion? Why don't you give her some special medicine? Why did you give me such a lousy task and ask me, a chef, to treat her tooth decay? Is there any justice in this world? Did you steal the task from the system next door and give it to me? Meg rolled his eyes, feeling a little unhappy. Host, please correct your attitude and actively treat her tooth, the system said weakly, and then its voice disappeared completely. At the same time, a notification appeared in the corner. Yunnan Baiyao long-acting toothpaste has been delivered to the third compartment of the counter. 3 toothbrushes with soft bristles are included. Feeling guilty? Meg raised his eyebrows. Although he was used to the system's unreliability, he was afraid that he would have to slowly think of a way to treat Princess Vanessa's tooth disease. After the dinner service, everyone finished cleaning up and returned to the dormitory. Connie didn't come back after delivering the food. After all, the deputy warden of the Bathai prison was her master, so Meg didn't bother to worry about her. After all, her job was to deliver food every day. He wanted to give Connie more time to cultivate, but he didn't know if there would be enough time. It wasn't a good thing for the orcs to be too united. Meg had just taken off his apron and chef's hat when there was a knock on the door. Isn't it time to rest? Amy looked curiously in the direction of the door. Maybe there's something else. Meg opened the door. Abraham, Vanessa, and a little maid were standing at the door. Mr. Mack, sorry to disturb you, Abraham said with a smile. Hello, Mr. Mack, I'm Vanessa. Vanessa smiled and looked at Meg with admiration. Mr. Meg was indeed full of charm up close. Meg looked at Vanessa. Her delicate face could indeed be called a little beauty. Her incomplete black teeth were a little out of place, but they couldn't hide her beauty. He smiled and said, I'm Meg. Miss Vanessa's smile is very beautiful. Vanessa was slightly stunned. Looking at Meg's gentle smile and sincere gaze, her heart trembled slightly. She was sure that he wasn't lying. What a wonderful feeling. She hadn't heard anyone praise her smile for a long time. Even if she did, it was just a lie because of her identity. People hated her teeth, hated her smile, and talked about her behind her back. But Meg praised him. Compared to Mr. Mack, Randy is really a little brother. Abraham sighed in his heart. At the same time, he raised Meg's vigilance to the highest level. If this guy wanted to, he could hook his finger, and the princess would be hooked. That wouldn't do. Laura also looked at Meg with vigilance. She still had some resentment towards this guy who refused the king's invitation and caused the princess to leave the palace and come all the way here. Although the food he made was delicious, he didn't look like a good person from the way he talked to the princess. He must have some ulterior motives. Please come in. Meg held the door with one hand and stepped aside to let Vanessa and the others in. Father, did you change to a new, beautiful sister tonight? Amy looked at Vanessa, who came in with a thoughtful expression. Equals the last day. Please vote. M. Chapter 1234. Hello. Vanessa came in and smiled at Amy and Anna, who were holding a fat orange cat. The 2 little elves were so cute and obedient, and the fat orange cat was also very adorable. Hello, big sister. Amy nodded. Although this big sister's teeth looked a little strange, they were still very beautiful. Hello. Anna nodded slightly and also looked at Vanessa curiously. Meg closed the door and gestured for Vanessa to sit down. He then stood in front of her and smiled. I'm not a doctor, so I might not be able to give you much help. I'll have to take a look at your teeth to confirm the specific situation. Okay. Vanessa nodded. She felt an inexplicable sense of trust when she looked at Meg. She didn't feel too much pressure even when she showed him her ugliest side. Instead, She was looking forward to him being able to help her. Although he was only a chef, she had high hopes for him. "Come, open your mouth," Meg said gently. Vanessa opened her mouth and revealed her teeth. Meg looked at Vanessa's teeth. He had already received the inspection report from his system, and this step was only to rationalize his actions. Although he had already expected this, Meg was still shocked when he saw Vanessa's complete set of teeth. Her teeth were supposed to be flat and white, but now they looked like they had been corroded by sulfuric acid. There were countless holes of various sizes, and there was a layer of black dirt on the surface of the teeth. They looked extremely stubborn. The most serious molars had been completely corroded, and only the roots of the teeth were left. It was difficult to imagine that these were the teeth of a 16-year-old girl. "Is there any other way?" Vanessa looked at Meg and asked. Laura looked at Meg nervously. If he could cure her teeth, then he would be a good man. Abraham also looked at Meg expectantly. The king had once summoned all the best doctors in the world and all the healing magicians in the Magus Tower, but none of them could cure Vanessa's teeth. There were even rumors that she was cursed by the gods, which was why she had a mouth of rotten teeth. These rumors were obviously extremely cruel to a young girl in her prime. "It's hard to say." Meg shook his head. Vanessa's eyes dimmed. She had heard the same thing from countless doctors and mages. "But we still have to try, don't we?" Meg said with a smile. Vanessa looked at Meg's smile and felt warmth in her heart. Hope rose in her heart again, and she nodded slightly. Meg straightened up and said, "For oral problems, the most important thing is to clean and take care of them in a timely manner. Now, we have to make sure that your teeth won't continue to deteriorate and eliminate the problem. After that, we can slowly repair your teeth and restore them to their normal appearance." Miss always rinses her mouth after eating. She pays a lot of attention to the cleanliness of her mouth. Laura said, "Did this guy think that Princess Heart's teeth were damaged because she didn't pay attention to hygiene?" Meg shook his head slightly and said, "I know, but if you only use sea salt to clean your teeth and rinse your mouth, it won't be enough, especially for Miss Vanessa's current situation." "Then how should I clean my teeth?" Vanessa asked. Meg walked to the counter and took out the Yunnan Baiyao Special Long-Lasting Toothpaste and 3 toothbrushes sponsored by the system. He showed it to Vanessa and said, "This is the toothpaste I made myself. Every day before you wake up and go to bed, use it to brush your teeth." "Toothpaste?" Vanessa looked at Meg in confusion. This was the first time she had heard of such a thing. Moreover, it was made by Meg himself and stored in a flat, round container. "Because it looks like an ointment and is used to clean your teeth, I named it toothpaste," Meg explained. Then he unscrewed the lid and tore open the sealed layer inside. He gestured. "This is a soft bristle toothbrush. Press the bottom of the toothpaste and squeeze out a pea-sized amount of toothpaste onto the toothbrush. Rinse your mouth once, then hold the toothbrush in your mouth and gently brush your teeth up and down for 3 minutes. After that, spit out the foam and rinse your mouth with water. Brush your teeth in one go." Vanessa looked at Meg in confusion. "I've drawn a manual for the specific process for you. When you go back, just follow the manual." Meg passed a folded piece of paper to Vanessa. "Okay." Vanessa took the manual with both hands. "Brushing your teeth is very important. Remember to do it every day before you go to bed and after you wake up. If you run out of toothpaste, come to me. A soft bristle toothbrush can be used for a month. After a month, change to a new toothbrush." Meg reminded her again. "Okay." Vanessa nodded. Her heart was filled with warmth. It had been a long time since someone had gently reminded her of such trivial matters. Moreover, it was a stranger she had just met. Perhaps to Meg, she was just a stranger. However, to her, he and the eggplant with garlic sauce had appeared in her dreams many times. Although she could not see his face clearly every time, there was a special sense of familiarity. Also, the tooth disease has already invaded your gums. If you eat anything too stimulating, it will cause secondary damage to your gums and teeth. It's not good for the recovery of your teeth. Therefore, from today onwards, you can't eat sugar or spicy or stimulating food. Especially before you go to bed at night, you are forbidden from eating anything other than water," Meg said seriously. At that moment, He felt that he was quite suitable to be a doctor. Then the sweet tofu pudding, Vanessa said weakly. No. Meg shook his head. He took the menu from the side and flipped it open. Then he said, it's not just a sweet tofu pudding. Black pepper steak, spicy grilled fish, roast beef kebabs, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. You can't eat any of these dishes before your teeth recover. Vanessa looked at the few dishes left on the menu and pouted. However, she also knew that Meg was doing this for her own good. Although she was very unwilling, she still nodded obediently. He seems to be quite professional. He's even more detailed than those doctors. Those doctors only told the princess to eat less sugar. But if she doesn't eat sugar, her teeth will still deteriorate. Laura looked at Meg in surprise. She just did not know if the princess would be able to hold back this time. All right, go back and rest early. Meg put the toothpaste and toothbrush into a small wooden box and handed it to Laura, who was standing at the side. Thank you, Mr. Mack. Vanessa stood up and looked at Meg gratefully. Treating teeth is a long-term thing. I believe that you can persevere. Meg smiled. I will. Vanessa nodded. When they walked out of the door, Abraham purposely stayed a few steps behind and grabbed Meg's hand. He said seriously, Mr. Mack, if Vanessa's teeth can be cured, I will definitely thank you greatly. Duke, you are too kind. Meg smiled. If Vanessa's teeth could not be cured, he would be the one with a headache. Chapter 1235. Has that big sister left? Amy asked curiously as she watched Meg close the door. She's just here to get some toothpaste. Meg nodded. No one knew what this little fellow was thinking about. He smiled and said, let's go upstairs and wash up. I'll tell you two a bedtime story. All right. Amy and Anna's eyes lit up, and they followed Meg upstairs obediently. On the other side, Vanessa and the rest had also returned to the manor that Abraham had bought in Chaos City. As soon as they entered the house and sat down, Vanessa took out the crystal jar that contained all kinds of candies. She opened the lid and pinched a beautiful blue candy between her slender fingers. Moss. Laura was about to remind her when she saw that. Vanessa's hand was still in the jar when she stopped. She looked at the beautiful candy in the crystal jar and hesitated for a moment before letting go of the candy between her fingers. Then she slammed the lid shut and shook her head. No, Mr. Mack said that I can't eat candies anymore. I've already made a promise with him. You stopped yourself? Laura was a little surprised. Usually, no matter how she tried to persuade the princess, she would only stop after eating a few candies. She didn't expect that she would actually stop herself today, just because of the promise with Mr. Mack. Laura, take this candy jar outside and bury it in the garden. Bury it somewhere I can't see. I don't need it anymore. Vanessa turned to Laura and passed the candy jar to her. Princess, His Majesty gave this to you on your 10th birthday. Are you really going to bury it? Laura was a little hesitant. This exquisite candy jar was carved by the best sculptor in the Roth Empire using a whole piece of top-grade crystal. It took him a year to carve it, and there was no other candy jar in the world that was more beautiful than it. Bury it. I don't need it anymore, Vanessa said firmly. She glanced at the candy jar in her hand. Otherwise, I want to eat candy every time I see it. All right. Lola carefully took the sugar jar. She also knew that the princess must have made a great decision to make such a decision. Moreover, her teeth were indeed much more important than the sugar jar. If the princess's teeth could recover, His Majesty would definitely be very happy. Laura went out with the candy jar, while Vanessa took out the manual that Meg had given her. The manual was written in a graphic format, and it explained the techniques and requirements of brushing teeth. Mr. Mack is such a considerate person. Vanessa's lips curled into a smile, and his smile appeared in her heart again. Also, the drawing is really beautiful, and the words are also beautifully written. Laura came back after a while. Vanessa picked up the toothpaste and a toothbrush and said, "Let's go wash up. I want to brush my teeth." It was the first time Vanessa brushed her teeth with a toothbrush and toothpaste, and it was a very novel experience for her. She thought that the white ointment would be very uncomfortable in her mouth, and that the hair-covered toothbrush might also cause a toothache. To her surprise, the toothpaste was very refreshing when it entered her mouth. The soft brush gently brushed her teeth and gums, and it was like a gentle little hand gently rubbing her teeth and gums. The cool feeling seeped into her gums, and the dull pain in her teeth seemed to be soothed and then nourished. The small toothpaste turned into a rich foam after being brushed by the soft brush, and it filled her mouth and the gaps between her teeth. It's so comfortable. Vanessa brushed her teeth in all directions according to the manual. Every night, her teeth would start to ache, and she had to use candy to trick them, but they were completely soothed. The soft brush licked her teeth and gums, and it brought her a very pleasant feeling. 3 minutes passed before she knew it. Vanessa spat out the foam in her mouth. The white foam was mixed with traces of blood and some small black spots. Vanessa was used to bleeding teeth, but it was the first time she saw those small black spots. Could it be that the black stuff on the surface of her teeth had been washed off? Vanessa rinsed her mouth with water and took a deep breath. Her mouth felt unprecedentedly refreshed, and there was a faint fragrance of jasmine. Her teeth also seemed to have undergone a deep cleaning, and the swollen gums and painful roots of her teeth were greatly relieved. A refreshing feeling surrounded her teeth. "Princess, is it effective?" Laura asked carefully. "Yes. After brushing my teeth, my mouth feels exceptionally refreshed. Even my teeth don't hurt anymore." Vanessa nodded. The painkillers that the doctor prescribed for her in the past were far less effective than this toothpaste. Really? Laura was pleasantly surprised. She knew very well how painful the princess looked when she had a toothache. She didn't expect that the pain would disappear after brushing her teeth with this toothpaste. This effect was too miraculous. "Mr. Mac is really amazing." Vanessa sighed. Laura nodded. She would be good to anyone who was good to the princess. The Wind Forest, Starry Cave abode. Helena stood on the platform and looked down at Sally as she asked, "Do you know which star in this starry sky is yours?" "I don't know." Sally looked up at the starry sky at the top of the cave. She shook her head slightly as she looked at the brightest star. "If this star is destroyed, you will become the brightest new star," Helena said as she pointed at the brightest star. "If that happens, the entire starry sky will be overshadowed." Sally frowned. "Even if the light is a little dimmer, it's still better than the entire starry sky being destroyed by a shooting star." Helena's voice was slightly cold. Her gaze fell on the star in the center that was enshrouded in mist. Sally was silent. "Tomorrow, I will lead the army south to exterminate the night elves. You will follow me and kill her with your own hands. Then, you'll be the new elven princess." Helena lowered her head and looked at Sally. Sally pursed her lips and clenched her fist subconsciously. "Your family and the entire elven race need you to do this." Helena's voice gradually turned cold. "Remember, I have more choices." "Yes." Sally was silent for a long time before she finally nodded. "Sir, there is an urgent report from the forest. High Priestess Helena will lead the army south tomorrow. She is expected to arrive in 2 days and launch an all-out attack on the underground cavern." A young general walked quickly into the tent and reported respectfully to Borg, who was discussing a strategy with a few other generals. "Sir Borg, I'm afraid High Priestess Helena wants to take the credit this time. Should we take down the underground cavern before she arrives? The queen is in seclusion, and the princess is openly rebelling. Now, many families in the Wind Forest are still waiting to see which side to follow. If the High Priestess gains a greater reputation in quelling the rebellion, I'm afraid those families will lean towards her." The generals in the tent spoke one after another. "Those slaves are indeed useless. But do you think Irina is also a pushover? I'll wait for Helena to come and fight to the death with her. Then we'll be the fishermen." Borg sneered. The hideous black lines could be vaguely seen. "Helena will lead the army south today and arrive at the underground cavern in 2 days." The next morning, Meg received a secret letter from the Grey Temple. Chapter 1236. The shorter the content, the more serious the matter was. This was a very practical experience. Meg looked at the short, secret letter in his hand, and once again confirmed the seriousness of the matter. Helena's decision to go south was already set. Now, they had a precise time. 2 days later, the Allied forces in the Wind Forest would converge, and they would definitely launch an all-out attack on the underground caverns. With the overall strength of the Night Elves, they would definitely not be able to resist the Allied forces. Irina would not be able to do it alone, and the Night Elves would face extinction. Meg pondered silently for a while, and then burned the secret letter into ashes. It seemed like he would have to make a trip to the north soon. However, he did not know what Chaos City would think of this news and whether they would do something else. That spy only sent him a letter today and did not mention anything else. He only told him to go to the city Lord's Castle later. Father, the students are going to have their holidays soon. Can I sign up for the end-of-term literary and artistic gala? Amy and Anna had already woken up and come downstairs. Mag was still thinking when Amy and Anna came downstairs. Amy rubbed her sleepy eyes. Join the literary and artistic gala? Meg was a little surprised, but he quickly nodded with a smile. Of course. If Amy wants to join, then sign up. In the past, Amy did not dare to talk to strangers. Now, the little one was getting bolder and bolder. She even took the initiative to ask to join the literary and artistic gala. This was not a small improvement. Then, can I let Big Sister Anna perform with me? Amy asked expectantly as she held Anna's little hand. This? Meg looked at Anna, who was also looking forward to it. He nodded with a smile and said, Then, I will go and look for Teacher Luna later. I think she will agree. That's great. Father, I love you. Amy pounced over happily, and Meg picked her up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his cheek. Meg kissed Amy on the forehead and put her down with a smile. Then he turned around and went into the kitchen. All right, you guys go and play. Father is going to start making breakfast for the cleaners. Of course, he could not sit idly by and do nothing about the Night Elves. However, if he were to defend the catacombs to the death, even if he managed to survive the encirclement this time, he would definitely be encircled again and again. With his limited manpower, it would be very difficult to shake the foundation of the Wind Forest rule in a short period of time. It would depend on Irina's comprehension on how to rapidly expand the Night Elves team and truly shake the foundation of the Wind Forest rule. He had already asked Phyllis to bring the theory to her. Whether she could understand it and put it into practice depended on Irina. Comrades, please allow me to address you as such, because we are a group of like-minded elves gathered together for the same goal. In a large stone hall in the catacombs, Irina stood in the middle, while the other elves sat around her with her as the center. They looked at Irina with sparkling eyes full of trust and hope. We rose up to fight for freedom and started this Dark Night revolution, but those oppressors smeared us as rebels, trying to smear our revolution by stigmatizing us. They also used a large number of troops to encircle and annihilate us in the cradle. But we will never give up. The spark of the revolution will never be extinguished. Irina clenched her fist and raised it above her head as she said firmly, The spark of the revolution will never be extinguished. All the elves clenched their fists and shouted in unison. Their emotions were stirred up for a moment. Irina's gaze swept across the faces of all the elves. Many of them were injured. In the past few days of fighting, they still suffered many casualties despite having the terrain advantage. However, there was no fear or dejection on their faces at this moment. We have broken through the enemy's 3 rounds of encirclement, but the 4th round of encirclement will come soon. Also, there is accurate news from the Wind Forest that Helena has already led her troops south and will join forces with Borg to carry out the final encirclement and annihilation of the Night Elves, Irina said calmly. The cave gradually quieted down. The elves did not appear to be very fearful, but the atmosphere was a little gloomy and pessimistic. Borg's army alone was enough to make the Night Elves exhausted. If High Priestess Helena led her troops to join the encirclement and annihilation, none of them would be able to leave the catacombs alive. I want some of you to leave through the secret passage in the catacombs and return to the Wind Forest and the villages around the forest. Then, you can tell more elves what we are doing. We are fighting for the freedom of the elven race. We want to build a free and peaceful elven nation without oppression and hierarchy. This is a difficult decision, but in order to preserve the seeds of revolution, we have to do this, Irina said in a low voice. All the elves were shocked to hear that. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. What about you, Your Highness? Are you going to leave with us too? Shirley stood up and looked at Irina. All the elves also looked at Irina. No, I want to stay and continue fighting. Irina shook her head and said with a determined gaze, the night elves cannot avoid this battle. Otherwise, it will completely become an excuse for those rulers to oppress the weak even more. We have to show a strong will. Even if we can't win, we have to bite off a piece of meat from them. Tell our people that as long as we unite, their rule is not unshakable. Shirley looked at Irina, and her eyes lit up. She raised the magic caster's staff in her hand and shouted, I will follow you into battle. We will follow you into battle. All the elves stood up and raised the weapons and magic caster's staffs in their hands. They shouted with flames dancing in their eyes. Irina looked at everyone, and her heart was filled with gratitude. However, she shook her head and said, this is a battle that is destined to be difficult to win. What we have to do is to show the oppressors the courage of the Night Elves, but most importantly, we have to preserve the seeds of revolution. We have to scatter the seeds among the people and turn them into sparks. One day, these sparks will be able to burn down the entire Wind Forest. All the elves were deep in thought. Let the little ones contribute to the sparks. We old things will turn into dry firewood and follow you to burn one last time in this battle. I hope that the future of the Wind Forest will be as we wish and become a free elven nation. An elderly elf stood up with a smile. That's right. The racial war back then didn't bring about a better the Wind Forest, so let us old things fight one last time and kick off this battle for freedom. Another elderly elf stood up. More and more elderly elves stood up. Suffering and long years had left many traces on their faces, but they still had warm smiles on their faces. Book Guest House Reading website, that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.